Chapter 1 of Grimm's Fairy Tales, Retold in One-Syllable Words. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Doug Fajardo. Grimm's Fairy Tales, Retold in One-Syllable Words by Jacob and Wilhelm Grimm. Chapter 1 Hansel and Grethel. Once upon a time there dwelt near a large wood a woodman with his wife and two children, a boy named Hansel and a girl named Grethel. The man was quite poor, the children's own mother was dead, and their stepmother did not care for them. Hard times came when there was no work for the man by which he could earn the means to buy bread. One night, after they had gone to bed, the boy and girl heard their fa ther and moth er talk ing. "What shall we do?" said the fa ther. "How can we feed the chil dren when we have not as much as two need to eat?" "We must get rid of the chil dren," said the step moth er. "Let us take them to the thick part of the wood in the morn ing, and there make them a fire, and give each of them a small piece of bread. Then we will go to our work and leave them a lone, so they will not find their way home, and we shall be freed from them." "No, wife," said he, "that I can not do. How can you have the heart to leave the poor things in the wood, where the wild beasts will soon come and tear them to bits?" "Oh, you goose," said she, "then we must all four die for want of food." And she left him no peace till she made him yield. The boy and girl heard all this, for they had not gone to sleep as their par ents thought they had. Grethel wept, and said to Hansel, "Oh, what shall we do?" But Hansel told her not to cry, for he would look out for her. And as soon as the parents had gone to sleep, he got up, put on his coat, and crept out of doors. The moon was bright, and the small white stones which lay on the path in front of the house shone like pearls. Hansel went down on his knees, and picked up a lot of them, and put them in his pock et. Then he went back to Grethel and said, "Sleep in peace, dear sis ter. God will take care of us." The next day, as soon as the sun rose, the wife called the two chil dren. "Come," she said, "you must get up at once. We have to go to day to chop wood." Then she gave them each a piece of bread, and said, "Here is some thing for your lunch. Don't eat it till it is time, for it is all you will get." Grethel took the bread, for Hansel's pock ets were so full of stones there was no room in them for it, and so they set out on their way. As they went on, Hansel, each few steps, dropped one of the stones on the path. When they had gone far in to the wood, the fa ther told the chil dren to pick up some wood for a fire, so they should not be cold. Hansel and Grethel picked up quite a large heap of twigs, and the wife set fire to them. As the flames burned high, she said, "Now lie down by the fire and rest, while we chop wood. When it is time to go home, I will call you." Hansel and Grethel sat down by the fire, and when it was noon each ate a piece of the bread. They could hear a sound like blows of an axe, and thought their fa ther must be near. But it was not an axe, just a branch which he had bound to a tree, so as to be blown to and fro by the wind. At last they fell a sleep. When they woke up it was quite dark, and Grethel be gan to cry. "How shall we get out of the wood?" But Hansel tried to com fort her by saying, "Wait a while till the moon comes up, and then we will find the way in a short time." The moon shone forth, and then Hansel took his sis ter's hand, and traced his way by the stones he had dropped on the path. All night long they walked on, and as day broke they came to their fa ther's house. They knocked at the door, and when the wife o pened it and saw them, she cried out, "You bad chil dren, why did you sleep so long in the wood? We thought you would nev er come." But the fa ther was glad, for it had made him feel sore at heart to leave them in the wood. The times grew worse and worse, and soon the chil dren heard their moth er say to their fa ther, "All is gone a gain. We have but half a loaf left, and then we must starve. The chil dren must go. We will take them deep er in to the wood, so they may not find their way out this time. It's the on ly way we can es cape death our selves." But the man felt sad, and thought it would be bet ter to share the last crust with the chil dren. But his wife would not give in to him, and in the end she had her way. The chil dren heard all this as they lay a wake in bed, and as soon as the man and his wife went to sleep, Han sel got up. He meant to pick up some more of the stones, but the wife had locked the door, and he could not get out. Still he tried to com fort Greth el, say ing, "Do not cry. Sleep in peace. God will not for sake us." At sun rise the wife came and made them get up, and gave each a slice of bread which was small er than the first piece. On the way Hansel broke his in his pock et, and now and then dropped a crumb in the path. The chil dren were led deep in to the wood, to a part in which they had nev er been be fore. A big fire was made, and the wife said to them, "Sit down here and rest, and when you feel tired you can sleep for a while. We must chop wood, but in the eve ning, when we are through, we will come for you." When noon came, Greth el shared her bread with Hansel, who had strewn his on the path. Then they went to sleep. But eve ning came, and still they were left a lone. In the dark night they woke up, and Hansel said to Greth el, "On ly wait, Greth el, till the moon comes out. Then we shall see the crumbs of bread I have dropped, and they will show us the way home." The moon shone, and they got up, but they could see no crumbs, for the flock of birds that had flown a bout in the woods and fields had picked them all up. "We shall soon find the way," Hansel kept say ing to Greth el. But they did not, and they walked the whole night long and the next day, and still they did not come out of the wood. They were weak for want of food, for they had noth ing to eat but a few ber ries which they found on a bush. Soon they got too tired to drag them selves a long, so they lay down at the foot of a tree and went to sleep. The third day since they left home came, and still they walked on, but they on ly got deep er in the wood, and Hansel saw that if help did not come soon, they must die. Just then they saw a snow white bird that sat on a bough, and sang a sweet song. It soon left off, spread its wings, and flew a way. The chil dren went af ter it till they came to a small house, on the roof of which the bird perched. When they went up close to it, they saw that the house was made of bread and cakes. This was a fine treat for the hun gry boy and girl, and each broke off a piece of the house, and be gan to eat. All at once an old wom an o pened the door and came out. The chil dren were in such a fright that they let fall what they had in their hands. But the old wom an said, "Ah, you dear chil dren, what has brought you here? Come in and stop with me, and no harm will come to you." She took them both by the hand, and led them in to the house. There she gave them a fine meal of cakes and milk, fruit and nuts, and when they were through, put them to bed in a nice room with two small beds in it, in which the chil dren lay down, and thought they were in heav en. The old wom an was kind to them at first, but in truth she was a witch who caught chil dren to eat them, and had built the bread house to serve as a trap for them. The next morn ing she came and looked at them as they slept, and mumbled to her self, "They will make a nice bite for me." Then she took up Hansel with her rough hand, and shoved him in to a small room that had a barred door, like a cage. He cried loud ly, but it was of no use. Next she took Greth el and said, "Get up, you la zy thing, and fetch some wa ter to cook food for your broth er, who must stay in that cage and get fat." When he's fat as he ought to be, I shall eat him." Grethel began to cry too, but it did no good, for the old witch made her do what she wished. So a nice meal was cooked for Hansel, but Grethel got noth ing but crab's claws. Each morning the old witch came to the cage and said, "Hansel, stick out your finger so I may see if you are fat." But Hansel used to stick out a bone, and the old witch, who had poor sight, took it for his finger, and thought it strange that he was so lean. When 4 weeks had passed, and Hansel still kept quite lean, she got tired of wait ing, and said she would have him for din ner the next day, fat or lean. The chil dren be gan to cry, but the old witch told them to be still. "Leave off that noise," she said. "It will not help you a bit." Next morn ing she made Grethel fill the great pot with wa ter, and make a fire. "First we will bake, though," said the old witch. "The ov en is al read y hot, and I have made the bread." She pushed poor Grethel up to the ov en, in which there was a fierce fire. "Creep in," she cried, "and see if it is hot e nough, and then we will put in the bread." She meant, when Grethel got in, to shut up the oven and let her bake, so she might eat her as well as Hansel. But Grethel knew what she wished to do, and said, "I don't know how to do it. How can I creep in?" "What a goose you are!" said the old witch. "The door is large e nough. Look here, I can get in my self." And she crawled up and stuck her head in the oven. A bright thought came to Grethel. She gave the old witch a push, and she fell in to the oven. Then Grethel shut the door and drew the bolt. How the old witch did howl! But Grethel ran to the cage and let her broth er out. "Oh, Hansel, we are free!" she said. "The old witch is dead." As soon as the door was o pened, Hansel sprang out from the cage like a bird, and they were so glad they threw their arms round each other's neck, and kissed each other, and ran a bout for joy. They went through the house, and in each cor ner stood chests of gold and pearls. "These are bet ter than the small white stones," said Hansel, as he filled his pock ets with all they could hold. "I will take some home too," said Grethel, as she filled her a pron. "Now we must go," said Hansel, "and get out of this be witched wood." When they had walked for 2 hours, they came to a large piece of wa ter. "How shall we cross?" said Hansel. "I see no bridge of any kind." "There are no boats e ither," said Grethel. "But there swims a white duck. I will ask her to help us to cross." "Oh, lit tle white duck, let poor Hansel and Grethel ride a cross the wa ter on your back," said she. The duck swam up to them, and Hansel sat down on his back, and told his sis ter to sit be hind. But she said, "No, that would be too much for the duck. She must take us one at a time." The good lit tle duck did so, and when they had walked a short time on the oth er side, they came at last to a part of the wood which they knew. They went on, and at last came in sight of their fath er's house. Then they be gan to run, and, burst ing in to the room, threw their arms round their fath er's neck. The poor man had not had one hap py hour since he left his chil dren in the wood, and af ter he had lost them, his wife had died too. Grethel shook her a pron, and the pearls and gems rolled out on the floor, and Hansel drew hand ful af ter hand ful from his pock et. Their sor row was now at an end, and they lived in great peace and joy. Chapter 2. Hansel and Grethel. Chapter 2. Mr. Korbes. Once upon a time, a cock and a hen thought they would like to go on a short trip. So the cock built a nice cart with 4 red wheels, and hitched up 4 mice to it, and off they drove. They had not gone far when they met a cat, who said he would like to know where they were bound for. "We mean to make a call on Mr. Korbes," said the cock. "Well, take me with you," said the cat. "All right," said the cock. You may sit in the back part of the cart, but take care that you do not scratch my red wheels." And then he cried out, "Now turn fast, little wheels, and race on, little mice, or we will be too late to find Mr. Korbes at home." But they did not get on at all fast, for they stopped first to take in a millstone, and then an egg, then a duck, and then a pin, and, last of all, a needle. When they did reach the house of Mr. Korbes, he was not at home. The mice drew the cart in the shed. The cock and hen flew up on a beam. The cat sat by the hearth. The duck on the well curb. The egg wrapped itself in a towel. The pin stuck, point up, in a chair. The needle went in the bed, and the millstone laid itself up over the door. Soon Mr. Korbes came home. He went to the hearth to make a fire, but the cat threw coal dust in his eyes. He ran to the well to wash them, but there the duck threw water at him. Then he went to dry his face, but as he took up the towel, the egg burst, and flew in his eyes, and stuck them fast like glue. So much ill luck made him feel tired, so he sat down in his chair to rest. But the pin stuck in him, and he sprang up in a great rage. He threw himself on the bed, but as soon as his head touched the pillow, the point of the needle pricked him, so that he gave a great shout of pain, and in great wrath ran to the door to leave the house. But just as he reached the door, the millstone fell on his head, and killed him on the spot. Do you not think that Mr. Korbes must have been a bad man? End of chapter 2. Mr. Korbes. Chapter 3. The Wolf and the 6 Little Kids. There was once an old goat who had 6 kids, of whom she was as fond as a mother could be. One day she had to go out and get some food for them. So she called them all to her and said, "Dear young ones, I must go out and get some food for you. Be on your guard that the wolf doesn't come into the house, for if he does, he will eat you all up. He will try in all ways to fool you, but you can tell him with ease by his rough voice and his black feet." "Dear mother," said the kids, "you need have no fear. We will take good care not to let the wolf in." So the old goat said good bye, and went off with her mind at rest. It was not long when the kids heard a knock at the door, and some one cried, "Open the door, dear young ones. Your mother has come home, and has brought something nice for each one of you." But the kids knew by the rough voice that it was the wolf, and they said, "We'll not open the door for you. You are not our mother. She has a fine, sweet voice, but yours is coarse and harsh. You must be the wolf." So the wolf left them, and went to a store where he bought a large piece of chalk. This he ate to make his voice soft, and then he came back and knocked at the door of the goat's house again. "Open the door, dear young ones," he said. "Your mother has brought something nice for each one of you." But the wolf had put his black paws on the window sill, and the kids saw them. So they cried, "We'll not open the door for you. You're not our mother. She has not big black feet. You must be the wolf." Then the wolf ran to the baker and said, "I have hurt my foot. Please put some dough on it." As soon as his foot was covered with dough, he ran to the miller and said, "Put some white flour on my foot." The miller thought, "This wolf wants to play a trick on some one," and he was not going to do it. But the wolf said, "If you don't, I will eat you up." This put the miller in a fright, so he spread flour on the wolf's feet. Then the bad wolf went for a third time to the goat's house, knocked, and said, "Open the door, dear young ones. your mother has come home and brought something nice for each one of you." "Show us your feet first," said the kids, "that we may know if you are our moth er or not." The wolf put his paw on the win dow sill, and when they saw that it was white, they thought he must be their moth er, and let him in. Great was their fear when they saw it was the wolf. They ran this way and that way, tried to hide. One went un der the ta ble, an oth er in to the bed, a third in to the ov en, a fourth in to the cup board un der the wash board, and the sixth in to the clock case. But the wolf found them, and ate up all but the young est one of them, the one that was hid in the clock case. Then the wolf went out, and on the grass be neath the tree went to sleep. In a short time the old goat came home. What a sight met her eyes! The door stood wide o pen, and the whole house was up set. Not a kid was to be seen. She called each one, but no one spoke, un til she came to the name of the young est, where a weak voice said, "Dear moth er, I am hid in the clock case." She helped the young kid out, and heard how the wolf had come and eat en up all her oth er dear young ones. She wept and wept as if she would nev er stop. At length she and the kid went out for a walk. When they had gone a few steps, they saw the wolf, where he lay a sleep on the grass, snor ing so loud that he shook the leaves on the trees. The old goat looked at him with care, and thought she could see some thing move in side of him. "Can it be," she thought, "that my young ones whom he ate are still a live?" She at once sent the young kid home for the shears, and with them she cut the wolf o pen. She made just a small slit, when one of the kids put his head out. She cut some more, and out it sprang, and then an oth er and an oth er, till all were out, as full of life as ev er, for the wolf had been so greed y that he swal lowed them whole, and had not hurt them a bit. Oh, it was a time of joy! The kids danced and jumped a bout, they were so full of glee. But the old goat said to them, "Go now and get some stones. We will put them in side this scamp, and sew him up be fore he wakes." So the kids ran in great haste, and brought large stones, which they put in side the wolf. Then the old goat sewed up the slit, and the wolf did not wake or move. When the wolf's sleep was out, he got up, and as the stones gave him a great thirst, he went to a brook for a drink. As he stooped to drink, the weight of the stones made him fall in to the wa ter, and he was drowned. Then the 6 young ones gave a shout, "The wolf is dead! The wolf is dead!" And they and their moth er danced for joy all the way home. End of chapter 3. The Wolf and the 6 Little Kids.
Chapter 4. Tales about Elves. First tale. A shoe ma ker, through no fault of his own, once grew so poor that he had on ly as much stuff left as would make one pair of shoes. He cut out the shoes at night so that he could set to work the next day. But when he got up at dawn and went to work, he found the pair of shoes laid on his bench all made. He did not know what to think. He took the shoes in his hands and looked at them with care, but he could not find one poor stitch. They were as good as could be. A man soon came in who bought them, and thought they were so good a pair that he paid a high price for them. The shoe ma ker could now buy stuff for 2 pairs of shoes. He cut them out at night to lose no time, but there was no need of this, for when he got up the next day they were made. Before night he sold these, and could then buy stuff for 4 pairs of shoes. At dawn he found them made, and thus it went on, day by day. In this way he did well, and in the end got rich. One night he said to his wife, "How would it do for us to sit up and see who it is that does all this work for us?" His wife thought it would be well, so they set a light to burn, and hid at one end of the room, behind some clothes that hung there. When it was late, 2 small elves came in and went to work. They had no clothes on, though it was the cold part of the year. They did the work up fast, and then went away. The next day the wife said, "Those elves have made us rich, and we ought to make them a gift. I know what we will do. They must be cold without clothes, so I will make shirts, coats, pants, and socks for them, and you shall make each a pair of shoes." The man thought this a good plan, and by night the gifts were all made. They laid them on the bench, and then hid to see how the elves would act. At midnight they came in, and when they went to look for the stuff to work with, they found their nice new clothes in its place. They put them on in great glee, and danced and hopped about, and jumped over the bench and the chairs, and sang. At last they danced out of the room, and after that they were seen no more. But all went well with the shoemaker, and he had good luck as long as he lived. Second tale. There was once a poor maid who worked hard and was very neat. The house and the yard were swept with care, and the dirt was put in a heap and carried away. One day she found a note, and as she could not read, she took it to her master. It turned out to be a note from the elves to ask her to come and be a godmother to one of their children. The maid did not at first know what to do, but at length made up her mind to go. 3 elves came, who took her to a hollow mountain where they lived. All the things in their home were small, but rich and fine. The maid stood godmother to the child, and then she wished to go home, but the elves begged her to stay with them 3 days. So she stayed, and the days went by joyfully with her. When the time came for her to go, the elves gave her a lot of gold, and led her out of the mountain. When she got back to the house, she took her broom and set to work, but strange people came to her and asked who she was and what she did there. Then she found out that she had been in the home of the elves 7 years in place of 3 days, and that while she was gone, her old master had died. Third tale. There was once a mother who had the dearest little babe in the world, but one day the elves came and ran off with it, and in its place left a changeling with a great big head and staring eyes, who did nothing but eat and drink all the day long. The mother was full of grief, and told her neighbors of her sad piece of luck, and asked if they could tell her what she ought to do. One of them told her to set the strange child in front of the hearth, build a fire, and boil some milk in 2 eggshells. "This will make the child laugh," said the neighbor, "and if he once laughs, it will be all over with him." The woman did as she was told. As soon as she put the eggshells in place, the strange child sang out, "Old am I as the oldest tree, but to cook in eggshells is new to me." Then he began to laugh, and as he laughed, there came in a whole crowd of elves. To the great joy of the mother, they brought back her own child and placed it on the hearth, and took the strange one off with them. End of chapter 4. Tales about Elves.
The Straw, the Coal, and the Bean. In a small town there once lived an old dame. One day she had some beans to cook, so she built a fire on the hearth, and to make it burn fast, threw on some straw. As she poured the beans into the pot, one of them dropped on the floor and rolled near a straw. Soon a red-hot coal popped from the fire and fell near the bean and the straw. Then the straw spoke. "Good friends," said he, "where did you come from?" "I had the good luck to jump out of the fire," said the coal. "If I had not done so, I should have been burnt to death." Then the bean said, "I had the luck to get off with a whole skin too. If the old dame had put me in the pot, I should have been boiled to death with the rest of the beans." "And I too," cried the straw. "My fate would have been quite as sad if I had not slipped from the old dame's hands. All my brothers went up in fire and smoke, 60 at one time." "What shall we do now?" asked the coal. "I think," said the bean, "that as we have all had the same good luck in saving our lives, we had best stick together as friends, and before we get into worse scrapes, take a trip to strange parts and see some of the world." This plan pleased the coal and the straw, and the three set out at once. They had not gone far when they came to a small stream, and they were at loss to know how they should cross it. At last the straw said, "I will lay myself across the stream, and you can walk on me as if I were a bridge." So the straw stretched himself from one bank to the other. The coal, who had a good deal of fire in his nature, tripped out on the new bridge, but when he had got half way, he was seized with fright, stopped short, and dared not take a step more. The straw began to burn, broke in two, and fell in the stream, and the coal slipped in after him. The bean was so mean as to laugh at their bad luck, and it laughed so hard that its sides burst. Now they would all have been done for alike, if a tailor had not come that way. He felt sorry for the bean, so he sewed it up. The bean thanked him, but as he had used black thread to sew with, from that day to this, each bean has a black mark on it. End of The Straw, the Coal, and the Bean. Recording by Sharon Handy.
Chapter 6. Snow White and Red Rose. A poor widow once lived with her two daughters in a small, lonely house. The two girls were so fair, and looked so much like roses, that she called one of them Snow White, and the other one Red Rose. They were as good girls as could be found, at all times cheerful, and full of love for one the other. When they went out to walk, they would go hand in hand. If one said, "We will never part," the other would say, "Never, so long as we live." And what one had was always shared with the other. Often they went to the woods to pick berries, but no harm came to them. The hare would eat a leaf from their hands, the deer grazed at their side, and the birds sat on boughs near them and sang to them. They met with no mishap, and if night came on before they left the woods, they had no fear, but lay down on the moss and slept till dawn. Snow White and Red Rose kept the house so clean that it was a treat to look at it. In the sum mer time, Red Rose swept the floor, and placed a fresh bunch of flowers by the side of her mother's bed each morning before she was up. And in the winter, Snow White made the fire, and hung the kettle on the hook, where it shone like gold, so bright did the little maid keep it scoured. In the eve ning, when the snow fell, the moth er would say, "Go and bolt the door, Snow White." And then they would all sit by the fire, and the moth er would read from a large book while the girls spun. One eve ning, a knock was heard at the door, as if some one wanted to get in. "Quick, Red Rose," said the moth er, "go to the door. It may be some trav el er who looks for shelter." Red Rose opened the door, think ing to see a poor man, but in place of that, a big black bear poked his head in. Red Rose screamed and ran back, but the bear be gan to talk, and said, "Do not fear. I will not hurt you. I am well nigh dead with the cold, and wish to come in and warm my self by your fire." "Oh, you poor bears," said the moth er, "lie down by the fire, but take care that you do not burn your fur." The girls soon lost their fear of the bear, and came near him. Then the bear said, "Get the broom, chil dren, and brush the snow from my fur." They brought the broom, and brushed his fur until it was quite clean, and then he stretched him self out in front of the fire. At last the girls be gan to play with him, and pulled him a bout by his fur as if he were a big dog. The bear stayed all night, and at dawn the girls let him out, and he ran off o ver the snow in to the woods. But each night, at the same hour, he came back to the house, lay down at the hearth, and let the chil dren play with him for a while. They grew so used to his vis its that the door was not locked till he came. One day in spring he said to Snow White, "I must go a way now, and I shall not come back all sum mer." "Where do you mean to go, dear bear?" she asked. "I must go to the wood, and guard my treas ure from the dwarfs. In the win ter, when the frost makes the ground hard, they must stay down in the earth. But as soon as the sun melts the frost, they work their way up, and steal all they can find. And when a thing is once in their hands, it is hard to get it back a gain." Snow White felt sad to part with the bear. As she let him out through the door, his fur caught on a hook, and a piece of skin was torn off. Snow White thought she saw some thing gleam like gold un der his skin, but was not sure, for the bear ran quick ly off, and was soon lost sight of a mong the trees. Some time af ter this, the girls went to the wood to get some sticks for the fire. They came to a tree which lay on the path, and saw that some thing was spring ing up and down on one of the boughs, but they could not tell what it was. When they came near er, they saw a lit tle dwarf with an old face and a beard a yard long. The end of his beard had caught in a cleft in the tree, and he sprang a bout like a dog that was fast to a string, for he did not know how to free him self. He glared at the girls and cried, "Why do you stand there? Can't you come and help me?" "What have you done?" asked Red Rose. "Oh, you stu pid goose!" he cried. "I wished to split some wood for my fire. It drove in a wedge, and all was go ing well, when the wedge slipped out, and the wood closed up so quick ly that my hand some white beard caught, and I can't draw it out. There, don't stand and laugh, you milk faced things. Whew! How ug ly you are!" Well, the girls tried to get his beard out, but could not. At last one of them said, "I will run and get some one to help us." "Block heads!" he snarled. "Who wants more peo ple? You two are more than I want now. Can you think of noth ing else?" "Don't be cross," said Snow White. "I can help you." And she took her shears out of her pock et, and cut off the end of his beard. As soon as the dwarf felt that he was free, he seized a sack full of gold that he had hid a mong the roots of the tree, put it up on his shoul ders, and said, "Smooth faced fools, to go and cut a piece of my beard! They'll get their pay for it." Then he went off with out a glance at the girls. One day Snow White and Red Rose went to catch a mess of fish. As they came near the brook, they saw some thing like a great lo cust hop ping on the bank, as if it were go ing to jump in the stream. They ran to it, and saw it was the same dwarf. "Why do you do that?" asked Red Rose. "Do you wish to jump in the brook?" "I'm not such a fool as to wish to do that," he cried, "but this fish wants to pull me in." He had sat on the bank to fish, and his beard had been caught in the line, so that when a large fish bit at the bait, he did not have e nough strength to draw it out. But in place of that, the fish was pull ing him in to the wa ter. He clung to the reeds and grass, but it was of no use, for the fish pulled him where it would, and would soon have drawn him into the water. The girls came just in the right time. They held him back, and tried to get his beard loose, but they could not do so, as it and the line were so badly tangled. There was nothing to be done but to cut off another piece of the beard. The dwarf was in a great rage. "You toadstools!" he cried. "Now you have ruined my beard. It was not enough that you cut it once. Now you must take the best part of it. I dare not show myself to my own folks again. I wish you may have to run till your shoe soles come off for this." Then he drew a bag of pearls from the reeds, and slipped away without saying another word. Not long after this, the mother sent the girls to the town to buy some pins, thread, and lace. Their road passed through a field on which, here and there, lay large stones and rocks. Up in the air they saw a great bird that flew round and round. It sailed lower and lower, and at last sank down by one of the stones. Just then the girls heard a scream, and, running up to the bird, they saw that their old friend the dwarf had been seized by the bird, and was about to be carried off. The kind girls laid hold on the dwarf, and held him fast, till the bird gave up the contest and flew off. As soon as the dwarf got over his fright, he cried in his sharp voice, "Could you not have held me more gently? You have tugged at my fine brown coat till it is all in rags on my back." With no thanks, he picked up his bag of gems, and slipped into his den under the stone. The girls were used to his way, and did not mind his abuse, but went on to town, and bought what they had come for. On their way home they passed through the same field, and came upon the dwarf once more. He thought no one would pass at that late hour, and had come out of his den, and spread out his gems on the ground. They gleamed and shone in the setting sun, and the girls stopped to admire them. He began to scold and rage at them, but as he went on with his hard words and threats, a big black bear rushed at him with a growl. The dwarf sprang up in fright, but could not reach his den. The bear was too near. Then he fell on his knees to the bear, and cried, "Oh, dear, good Mr. Bear, spare me. I will give you all my gems. See them here. Spare my life. Of what use would such a poor little thing be to you? You would not feel me between your teeth. There are two bad girls. Take them. They are as fat as quails. Eat them in place of me." But the bear paid no heed to his words, struck him with one blow of his great paw, and he never stirred a gain. When the girls saw the bear, they started to run a way, but he called, "Snow White, Red Rose, have no fear. Wait, and I will go with you." They knew his voice and stopped, but when he came up to them, his rough coat of fur fell off, and there stood be fore them a handsome young man, dressed in rich clothes. "I am a king's son," he said. "The dwarf be witched me, stole my treasures, and made me run in the woods as a wild bear, till I should be set free by his death. Now he has received his well de served re ward." They went home, and not long af ter Snow White was mar ried to the prince, and Red Rose to his broth er. All the treas ures which the dwarf had gath ered in his den were shared be tween them, and they lived in great joy and peace for ma ny years. Chapter 7. Snow White and Red Rose.
Chapter 7. King Roughbeard. There was once a prin cess who was ver y fair, but so proud that she thought no man was good e nough to be her hus band. Kings and kings' sons came to woo her, but she met them with scorn and made game of all of them. Once the king, her father, gave a feast to which he asked all the young men he knew who were fit to be the husband of the princess. When they came, they were set in a row, and the princess was led down the line to make a choice, but she laughed at each one in turn. The one that she made the most fun of was a good young king, whom she named King Roughbeard, because his chin was not straight, and he had a rough beard. Her father was angry with her, and when she had sent all the young men away, told her she would have to marry the first tramp that came to the gate. The next day, a tramp who sang in the streets for what folks would give him came to the gate. The king called him in and sent for the princess, and in spite of her tears made her marry the street singer, and then turned both of them out of the house. So the tramp led her off with him, and she had to trudge along the road on foot. When they reached the next kingdom, which was that of the prince she had called King Roughbeard, she sighed and wept, and said, "Oh, that I had but married King Roughbeard when he wished me to." The tramp grew cross at this, and said, "Stop that. It does not please me that you wish you had married someone else. Am I not good enough for you?" By and by they came to a small, mean hut, where they stopped. "This is my house," said the tramp, and then the princess wished again that she had married King Roughbeard. The tramp told her that she must keep house and cook the meals for him, but the princess had not learned how to do these things, and her husband had to do them himself. At length he told her she must earn something, and he set her at work making baskets, but her hands were too soft to bend the twigs. Then he told her to spin, but the coarse thread cut her fingers and made them bleed. When he saw this, he sent her to the market with pots and pans to sell. Her pride made this a hard task for the princess, but she was so fair to look at that folks bought from her. One day, though, a drunken soldier rode down the street on his horse and plunged right into the midst of her wares and broke the whole of them. "I see you are not fit for such work," said her husband, "but I will try one more thing. I have heard that they need a maid in the king's kitchen, and I will try to get the place for you." They took the princess for the maid in the king's kitchen, and for pay she had to take home the scraps of food that were left. She had not been there long when the king gave a grand ball. The poor princess went upstairs to look at the guests from the door. As she stood there, the king saw her and seized her hand, and asked her to dance. She drew back in fright, for it was none else than King Roughbeard himself, who had once been refused by her with scorn. She tried to get away, but the king drew her into the ballroom. In the strife, the band broke that held a bag in which were her scraps of food, and they were all thrown out on the ballroom floor. She heard all the guests laugh, and she rushed from the room in shame. On the steps a man caught her and brought her back. When she looked at him, she saw it was King Roughbeard again. He looked at her kindly and said, "Do not fear. I and the tramp whom you married are one. My love for you led me to disguise myself. I was also the rude soldier that broke your wares. All this has been done to cure you of your pride." The princess wept and said, "I have done a great wrong, and I am not worthy to be your wife." But the king said, "Do not weep. These sad days are at an end. Now we will have our wedding feast." Then the maids came and dressed her in rich robes, and she was led out to meet her father, who had come with his whole court to wish her joy. Thus her trials came to an end, and never again was she proud or haughty.
End of chapter 7. King Roughbeard.
Chapter 8. The Frog Prince. In old times, when folks had but to wish for things to get them, there lived a king who had 3 fair girls. Close by the king's castle lay a dark wood, where there was a deep well or spring. One hot day the youngest girl went to the wood and sat down by the cool well. When she was tired of sitting still, she took out a ball of gold, which was one of her toys, and began to toss it up in the air and catch it. But one time that she tossed it up, she missed it, and it rolled into the well. She felt so bad that she wept, but in the midst of her weeping she heard a voice say, "Why do you weep, princess? Your tears would melt a heart of stone." She saw that it was a frog that spoke, and she said, "Oh, is that you, Mr. Frog? I weep for my gold ball, which fell into this well." "Do not weep," said the frog. "I can bring up your ball,
But what will you give me if I do so?"
"Just what you wish," she said. "My gowns, my pearls, or my gold crown."
"I don't care for these things," said the frog. "But if you will love me, and let me sit at meals with you, and eat from your plate, and drink from your cup, and put me to sleep in your silken bed, I will bring it up for you."
"Oh, yes," she said. "I will do all you ask." So the frog sank out of sight into the well, and soon came up with the ball in his mouth, and threw it onto the grass. The princess was so full of joy to see it that she snatched it up and ran off with it.
"Wait, wait," cried the frog. "Take me with you. I can't run as fast as you."
But it was no use, for croak as he might, she would not wait, but made haste home, and soon put the poor frog quite out of her mind. The next day, when she sat down to eat with the king and his court, a knock was heard at the door, and a voice cried, "Princess, let me in." At this she ran to the door to see who was there, and when she opened it, she saw the frog. She turned pale, and shut the door, and went back to her seat. The king saw that she was in a fright, and said, "My child, what ails you? Who was at the door?" "It is a frog," she said. "What does a frog want of you?" The princess had to tell the king what the frog had done for her. "You must keep your word," said the king. "Go to the door and let the frog in." So she let the frog in, and he hopped straight into her chair, and said, "Lift me up by you." When she had done this, he ate from her plate and drank from her cup, to her great disgust. Then the frog said he was tired, and asked the princess to put him to sleep in her own silken bed. Then she cried, for she did not wish to put the cold, wet frog in her neat bed, but the king told her she must. She took him upstairs and set him on the floor, but when he still said she must put him in her bed, she was in such a rage that she seized the frog and flung him at the wall. "Now be still, you horrid frog," she said. But as he fell to the floor, he was no more a frog, but a handsome young prince. He told the princess that he had been changed into a frog by a witch, and no one could set him free but herself. At the wish of the king, the prince stayed at the castle. Of course, he and the princess fell in love with each other at once, and before long they were married. End of chapter 8. The Frog Prince.
The Goose Girl. There once lived an old queen who had one child, a fair, sweet girl. This princess was to wed a king's son who lived a great way off. When the time came, the queen gave her much gold and gems, and a maid to wait on her and take her to the prince she was to wed. To each she gave a horse to ride, and that of the princess was named Fajardo, and it could talk. But the maid was false, and on the way she made the princess get off her horse and change her rich clothes for her own plain ones. Then, by threats that she would kill her if she would not do so, she made the princess take an oath that she would not tell of the change that had been made. When they came to the end of their ride, the king's son came out to meet them, and took the maid from her horse as if she were his bride that was to be. He led her up the steps, while the true princess was left in the courtyard. The king saw her there, and as he saw how sweet and fair her face was, and how soft and white her hands, he went in haste to ask the bride who it was she had brought with her. "Oh, I brought her with me to serve me on the road," said the false bride. "Give her some work to do, so that she may not waste her time." The king knew of no work to give her but to help a boy named Karl, whom he had to take care of geese. So the real princess was made a goose girl. The false bride was in fear that the horse Fajardo would tell on her, and she soon asked the prince to have it put to death. The prince told a man to kill the horse, but the real princess heard of it and gave the man a piece of gold to hang the head of the horse in an archway through which she had to drive the geese each morning. The next morning, as she and Karl passed through the archway, she said to the head, "O Fajardo, hanging high." And the head said, "O young princess passing by, if thy fate thy mother knew, her fond heart would break for you." They went on to a field where the geese fed all day, and the princess sat down and began to comb her hair. It looked like pure gold, and Karl wished to pull some of it out. Then the princess sang, Blow, blow, wind, blow. Take Karl's hat in the air, and do not let him catch it till I have combed my hair. A strong wind did take Karl's hat, and he had to run to catch it. When he came back, the hair was all combed and put up. Then Karl was vexed, and would not speak to the goose girl. The next day the same things took place, and Karl was so vexed that when they reached home, he went to the king and told him how the head of the horse spoke to the goose girl, and how she made the wind blow his hat off, and he had to run to catch it. The king told Karl to go with her to the fields next day, and he himself went and sat in the dark arch and heard what the horse's head said. Then he went after them to the fields and hid in a bush, and they saw with his own eyes the goose girl and boy drive in their geese, and in a short time the girl took down her hair that shone like gold, and he heard her say, Blow, blow, wind, blow. Take Karl's hat in the air, and do not let him catch it till I have combed my hair. Then the king felt a gust of wind come, which took off Karl's hat, so that he had to run a long way to catch it, while the goose girl combed out her hair and put it up in braids, before he could get back. The king went home, and that night sent for the goose girl, and told her all he had seen and heard, and asked her what it meant. That I dare not tell you, she said. My heart is full of woe, but I can tell the cause to no one, for I had to take an oath that I would not do so. If you will not tell it to me, said the king, tell it to that fireplace. And then he left her. The princess crept in the fireplace and began to weep and pour out her heart. Here I sit, she said, the child of a king, yet a false maid took my royal clothes from me, and took my place as bride at the side of the prince, while I must go out and watch the geese. Oh, if my mother knew of this, it would break her heart. But the king had stood near the door and heard all she said. He told her to come out, and he had her dressed in rich clothes, and then she was so fair it was a joy to look at her. The king sent for his son, and told him that he had the wrong bride, while the true bride was here, she who had been the goose girl. The prince was glad when he saw how sweet and good she was, and a great feast was at once laid. The true bride was placed on one side of the prince, and the false one on the other. The false one was so puffed up with pride that she did not know the true one. When all were through at the feast, the king told the tale the princess had told in the fireplace, and then he asked the false bride what should be done to one that had been so wicked. The false bride did not see that it was a trap for her, and she said, Such a one should be put in a cask with spikes in it, and dragged up and down the streets by horses till she is dead. You are that one, said the king, and as you have said, so shall it be done. Then the prince wed his true bride, and they lived in great joy and peace. End of chapter 9.
Chapter 10. Rapunzel. There once lived a man and his wife who wished much to have a child. At the back of their house was a garden full of choice green food, but there was a high wall, and all round it no one dared to come near it, for a witch owned it, and all were in fear that she might cast a spell on them. One day the wife saw some lettuce in the garden, and it looked so fresh and green that she longed for some of it. She wished more and more for it each day, and at last grew quite sad for want of it. The man saw how she pined, and said, What ails you, dear wife? Oh, I shall die, said she, if I do not get some of that lettuce that grows back of the house. I will get some, said he, cost what it will. So that night he climbed over the wall and got some. The wife liked it so well that she longed for more, and to give her rest the man went again to get some. But this time the old witch caught him and said, How dare you come in my place and steal my lettuce? You shall pay for this. Oh, said he, do not be so hard on me. I had to do it, for my wife wished so much for it that she would have died if she had not got it." "Well, if that is true," said the witch, "you may have all you like, but you must give me a pledge that you will do one thing. If you should have a child, you must give it to me. I will do well by it, and give it as good care as your wife would." In his fear, he said he would give the child to the witch. When weeks had passed, a child was born to them, and the witch came and claimed it. She called it Rapunzel, and took it off with her. Rapunzel grew to be a fair girl, and had hair of great length. When she was 12 years old, the witch shut her up in a tower that had no stairs, and but one small window at the top. When the witch wished to get in, she would say, "Rapunzel, Rapunzel, let down your hair." Then Rapunzel would let her long hair down out of the window, and the witch would climb up by it. Some years went by, and one day a young prince came that way and heard such a sweet voice sing from the tower that he had to stop. It was Rapunzel who sang that way to pass the time. The prince tried to get into the tower, but he could find no door. He went home, but the song still rang in his ears, and he came each day to hear it. Once, when he stood behind a tree, he saw the witch come and cry, "Rapunzel, Rapunzel, let down your hair." Then he saw the hair let down and the witch climb up by it. The next day he came to the tower and called, "Rapunzel, Rapunzel, let down your hair." She let her hair down, and the prince at once climbed up it. Rapunzel was in great fear when she saw the young man, but the prince spoke to her kindly, and told her how he had heard her sing, and that he could not rest till he had seen her. Rapunzel lost her fear, and when he asked her if she would be his wife, she thought, "He is better than the old witch," and she put her hand in his and said, "Yes, I will go with you, but how am I to get down?" "Each time you come, bring with you a skin of silk, and I will weave it into a rope and go down by it." The prince said he would do this, and then climbed down and went home. But the old witch had seen him go. She was in a rage, and as soon as she had climbed up in the tower, she seized Rapunzel's long hair, took a pair of shears, and snip, snap, off fell the fine braids to the floor. Then she sent her off to a hut in a lonely place where she could see no one. When the prince came the next day, the old witch hung out Rapunzel's hair for him to climb up by. When he got to the top, she cried, "Ah, the bird has left the nest. The cat took her off and will now scratch your eyes out." The prince was full of grief when he heard these words, and in his despair sprang from the window. He was not killed, but the thorns on which he fell put out his eyes. He roamed through the woods for a long time, mourning for his lost bride, and eating naught but roots and wild fruit. At last he came to the hut where Rapunzel lived in want and grief. As he drew near the place, he heard a voice that he thought he knew. He went to it, and Rapunzel knew him and ran to him, and threw her arms round his neck and wept. 2 of her tears fell on his eyes, and his sight at once came back. He led Rapunzel away to his kingdom, where they were received with great joy, and lived long and happy lives. End of chapter 10. Rapunzel.
The Town Musicians of Bremen. There was once an ass who for a long term of years had to take the bags to the mill. When his strength at last gave out, the man who owned him thought to sell him for his hide, but the ass saw that an ill wind was blowing, so one day he set out on the road to Bremen, where he thought he might play music in the town band. He had gone but a mile or so when he met a dog, who gasped as if he had run a long way. "Why do you pant so?" asked the ass. "Alas!" said the dog, "now that I am too old and weak to join in the hunt, my master wished to kill me, so I ran away. But how am I to earn my bread?" "Would you like to know? I am on my way to Bremen to join the town band. You might go with me and take up music too. I play the lute and you can beat the drum." The dog said yes to this, and they went on. They soon met a cat who looked very sad. "What ails you?" said the ass. "How can one feel gay that has had a close shave for his life?" said the cat. "I am old, and I like better to sit by the fire than to go out and hunt mice, so my mistress tried to drown me. I got off, but how am I to find food?" "Come with us to Bremen and join the town band," said the ass. The cat thought the plan was a good one, and went with them. As they passed a farmyard, they saw a cock that crowed with all his might. "Why do you make so much noise?" asked the ass. "Why, I just heard the cook say she meant to make soup of me today, so I mean to crow at the top of my voice as long as I can." "You have a fine voice," said the ass. "Come with us to Bremen and join the town band." The cock was pleased, and soon the four were on their way. But they could not reach Bremen in one day, so when night came they stopped in a wood to rest. The cock flew to the top of a tree, and from there he saw a light in a house near by. He told the others, and the ass said they ought to go and see what sort of place it was. They went, and as the ass was the tallest, he looked in and saw some men at a table spread with fine food. They all wished for some of the food, but did not know how to get it. At last they thought of a plan. The ass was to put his 4 feet on the window sill, the dog to spring on the back of the ass, the cat on the dog, and the cock was to perch on the cat's head. Then the ass was to bray, the dog to bark, the cat to howl, and the cock to crow all at once. They did this, and then sprang through the window, and made the glass fly on all sides. The men, who were a gang of thieves, sprang up in great fright and fled for their lives. Then the 4 friends sat down and ate up all the food. When all was gone, they put out the light and lay down to rest. The ass lay down in the yard, the dog near the door, the cat by the fire, and the cock perched on a beam. When it got late, one of the thieves stole back to the house, and when he saw no light and heard no noise, he went in. He saw the cat's eyes as they shone in the dark, and thought they were live coals, so he stooped to light a match by them. But the cat flew at his face and scratched him, so he ran out at the door. But before he got out, the dog sprang up and bit his leg. As he passed the ass in the yard, the ass gave him a kick, and all this time the cock kept up a loud cock-a-doodle-doo, and clapped his wings with all his might. The thief was scared near to death, and ran to tell the tale to his friends. "A witch sits in that house," he said. "She spat at me and scratched me. A man stood by the door and ran a long knife into my leg. And out in the yard lay a black beast that struck me with a club. Whilst up on the roof sat the judge, who cried, 'Bring me the rogue!' So I got off as fast as I could." From that time the thieves would not go near the house, and as the 4 friends liked it very well, they made it their home for years. End of The Town Musicians of Bremen.
Chapter 12. The 3 Spinners. There was once a pretty girl who did not like to spin, and her mother could not force her to do it, try as she might. At last her mother grew so cross that she struck the girl, and she set up in a loud cry that could be heard in the street. Just then the queen went by, and when she heard the girl scream, she stopped and asked the mother why she beat her girl so hard. The mother did not like to tell her that the girl would not spin, so she said, "I whip her because she will not cease to spin. She is always at the wheel, and we are too poor to buy flax for her." "I like to hear the wheel hum," said the queen. "Let her go with me to my castle. I have lots of flax, and she can spin all she wants to." The mother was pleased with this plan, and the girl went with the queen. When she reached the castle, the queen took her to 3 rooms full of flax, and said, "Spin this flax, and when it's done you shall be the bride of my son, the prince." The girl was in a fright, for she knew she could not spin the flax in her lifetime, even if she worked day and night. As soon as the queen left her, she began to weep, and she kept this up for 3 days. On the third day the queen came in, and knew not what to think when she found that the girl had not spun as much as one thread. But the girl made a plea that she had felt so sad to leave her home that she could not work. The queen was pleased that she loved her home, but she must now begin to work. When the girl was alone, she knew not what to do. She went to the window, and there she saw 3 women. The first one had a broad, flat foot, the next one had a large lip, and the third had a broad thumb. They asked her what was the matter, and she told them. They said they would help her if she would ask them to her feast on the day she was to wed the prince, call them her aunts, and let them sit at her table. "With all my heart," said the girl. "Come in and begin the work at once." She let the strange women in, and they began to spin. One drew the thread, and one worked the wheel with her foot. Another one wet the thread, while the third twisted it with her thumb. They had soon spun all the flax in the 3 rooms, and then went their ways. When the queen found the flax all spun, she set the day for the wedding. The girl asked if her 3 aunts might come, and the queen said they might. So on the day of the feast the 3 women came, dressed in fine clothes. When the prince saw them, he said, "Oh, how came you to have such ugly aunts?" He went up to the one with the broad foot and asked, "Why have you so broad a foot?" "From threading the wheel," she said. "Why have you so big a lip?" he asked the next one. "From licking the thread," she said. "And why is your thumb so large?" he asked the third one. "From twisting the thread," she said. The young prince then said that his pretty bride from henceforth must not touch a spinning wheel. This was the girl's reward for having kept her word. End of chapter 12. The 3 Spinners.
Chapter 13. The 7 Crows. There was once a man who had 7 boys, but no girl. At last a girl was born, but she was so weak and small that it was thought best to baptize her at once, lest she should die. The 7 boys were sent to the well for water. Each wished to draw the water, and in their strife the pail fell into the well. Then they feared to go in the house, and the father grew cross because they did not come. "I wish they would all change to crows," he said. And the words were no more than out of his mouth when the boys were changed to crows and flew off. This made the father grieve, but all the more did he love the girl, who soon grew strong and fair. When she became a big girl, she learned the fate of her brothers, and it made her sad. At last she left home to try to find them and break the spell that bound them. She went from one end of the earth to the other, but she did not find her brothers. Then she came to the sun, but it was hot and scorched her, so she ran to the moon. But there it was so cold that she went to the stars, who were kind to her. Each star sat on a grand seat of its own, and in the morning star rose and gave her a key, saying, "If you do not have this key, you cannot open the iceberg in which your brothers are shut up." But the girl lost the key and could not open the iceberg. She bent her finger and put it in the door, and by good luck it unlocked it. When she entered, she saw a dwarf who said, "My child, what do you seek?" "I seek my brothers, the 7 crows," she said. "They are not at home," said the dwarf, "but if you wish to wait for them to return, you may come in and sit down." The girl waited, and while she did so, she ate some food from each of 7 plates which the dwarf had set for the crows, and drank from each of 7 cups. In the last cup she dropped a ring which she had brought with her. All at once she heard a whir in the air, and the dwarf said, "The 7 crows are now flying home." Soon they came in and began to eat and drink, each seeking his own plate and cup. Then one said to the other, "Who has been eating from my plate? Who has been drinking from my cup? There has been a human mouth here." When the 7th came to the bottom of his cup, the ring rolled out. He looked at it and knew it as a ring that had belonged to his parents, and said, "Can it be that our sister is here? Then we are set free." When the girl, who had stood behind the door, heard these words, she stepped out, and at once the spell was broken. The 7 crows changed to 7 fine young men, and they embraced and kissed their sister, and in great joy they all set out at once for their home. End of chapter 13. The 7 Crows. Chapter 14. Little Snowdrop. Once upon a time, in the depth of winter, when the flakes of snow fell like feathers from the clouds, a queen sat sewing at her palace window, which had a carved frame of black wood. While she sewed, she pricked her finger, and 3 drops of blood fell on the snow. The bright red looked so well on the white snow that the queen thought, "Oh, that I had a child as white as this snow, as red as this blood, and with hair as black as the wood of this frame." It soon came to pass that the queen had a girl child who was as white as snow, as red as blood, and with hair as black as the window frame. She looked like a snowdrop, and hence was called by that name. And when the child was born, the mother died. When less than a year had passed, the king took a new wife, who was most fair, but so proud that she could not bear to think that anyone else came near her in beauty. She had a magic glass, and when she stepped in front of it and said, "Mirror, mirror on the wall, who is the fairest one of all?" it would say, "Thou art the fairest lady queen." Then she was pleased, for she knew the glass spoke the truth. But as Snowdrop grew up, she became fairer and fairer, till she reached the age of 8, and then was more lovely than the queen. The queen was vexed, and went to her glass. "Mirror, mirror on the wall, who's the fairest one of all?" The mirror replied, "Thou wert the fairest, lady queen. Snowdrop is fairest now, I ween." The queen was shocked, and turned green with envy. From that hour the sight of Snowdrop filled her heart with hate, and the hate grew so strong and fierce that she had no rest, night or day. At last she called a hunter to her, and said, "Take this child to the woods. I cannot bear the sight of her. Kill her, and bring me her heart and tongue as proof that you have done what I bid you." The hunter took the child to the woods, but when he drew his knife to kill her, she begged him to spare her life. "I will run into the woods, and not be seen any more," she said. This speech touched the man's heart, and he took pity on her and let her go. Just then a young boar came to the spot, and as soon as he saw it, the man caught and killed it. Then he took its heart and tongue, and brought them to the queen, and told her they were Snowdrop's. But now poor Snowdrop was left alone, and knew not which way to turn. She ran through the woods, and saw some wild beasts, but none of them harmed her. She ran on till dark, and then she came to a small hut, into which she went. There was no one inside, but a table was set with food for 7 persons. Snowdrop was in dire need of food, so she ate a small speck of what was on each plate, and drank a drop or 2 of wine out of each glass, for she did not wish to take the whole share of any one. There were 7 small beds ranged in a row, each covered with snow-white sheets. Then Snowdrop, because she was tired, lay down in one of the beds, but it did not suit. Then she tried the next, but that was too long. The third was too short, the fourth too hard, and so on till she came to the 7th, which was just right. So she tucked herself up in it, and when she had prayed to God to take care of her, she went to sleep. By and by the lords of the house came home. They were 7 dwarfs, who delved all day in the hills for gold. They saw that someone had been in the room, that it was not just as they had left it. The first one said, "Who has sat in my chair?" The second, "Who has eaten from my plate?" The third, "Who has nibbled at my bread?" The fourth, "Who has been at my broth?" The fifth, "Who has used my fork?" The sixth, "Who has been cutting with my knife?" The seventh, "Who has drunk out of my cup?" Then the first one, looking at his bed, saw that a dent had been made in it, and he cried out, "Who has stepped on my bed?" They all ran, each one to his bed, and cried, one after the other, "Someone has been in my bed." But the 7th one, on looking at his, saw Snowdrop. He called his brothers, who ran to the bed with their lamps in their hands. They looked at her in wonder. "What a beauty she is," they said. And they were so much pleased that they would not wake her, but left her to sleep, and the 7th dwarf, in whose bed she was, slept 1 hour with each of his fellows, and so the night passed. When Snowdrop woke in the morning and saw the dwarfs, she was frightened. But they were friendly, and asked her how she had come to their house. Then she told them how her stepmother would have had her killed, and how her life had been spared. The dwarfs told her that if she would keep house for them, she might stay with them, and should want for nothing. "I will do all this gladly," said Snowdrop, and so she stayed with them. The dwarfs went out each day to dig for gold, and they told Snowdrop to take great care not to let a soul in the house while they were not there. "It will not be long," said they, "till your stepmother will know you are here." The Queen, in the meantime, had not thought but that Snowdrop was dead, and that once more she was the fairest person in the world. She went to her glass one day and said, "Mirror, mirror on the wall, who's the fairest one of all?" And it replied, "Thou wert the fairest, Lady Queen. Snowdrop is fairest now, I ween. Amid the forest darkly green she lives with dwarfs, the hills between." Then the Queen knew the hunter had not told her the truth. She thought and thought how she could kill Snowdrop, and at last she hit on a plan. She stained her face and put on a dress of a peddler woman, and went over the hills to the dwarf's house. She knocked, and Snowdrop looked out, and thinking she was some poor woman, let her in, and bought a stay-lace from her. "Come," said the old woman, "let me lace your pretty waist right." And Snowdrop let her do so. But she drew the lace so tight that Snowdrop could not breathe, and fell down as if dead. Then the Queen sped away. When the dwarfs came home, they found their dear Snowdrop lying on the floor. They raised her up, and when they saw that she was laced too tight, they cut the stays, and in a short time she began to breathe. When they heard what had taken place, they knew the Queen had been there, and they warned Snowdrop to take more care and let no one come in the house when they were not with her. When the Queen reached home, she went to her glass and said the same words, "Mirror, mirror on the wall, who's the fairest one of all?" And it replied once more, "Thou wert the fairest, Lady Queen. Snowdrop is fairest now, I ween. Amid the forest, darkly green, she lives with dwarfs, the hills between." Her rage was great, and she set her wits to work again to plan Snowdrop's death. By the aid of witchcraft, she made a poisoned comb, and dressed as an old woman, and set out once more over the hills. She knocked at the door of the dwarf's house, calling, "Nice goods for sale." Snowdrop peeped out and said, "You need not stop here, I shall let no one in." "But still you may look," said the old woman, and she held up the comb. The child was so much pleased with the pretty comb that she forgot her fears and opened the door. "Now," said the peddler, "let me show you how to use it," and she began to comb Snowdrop's hair. The poison worked at once, and Snowdrop fell to the floor senseless. By good luck, the dwarfs soon came home, and when they saw Snowdrop lying on the floor, they knew the stepmother had been there again. As they raised Snowdrop, they saw the comb in her hair, and as soon as they drew it out, she revived. When the queen reached home, she went again to her glass, and got it from the same reply as twice before. This made her wild with rage. "Snowdrop shall die," she cried, "even if it cost me my life." She went to a secret room which no one else could enter, and there made a deadly, poisoned apple. Then she again stained her face, and dressed as a peasant's wife, and went a third time to the dwarf's house. She knocked, but Snowdrop looked out of the window and said, "I dare not open the door, for the dwarfs have told me to let no one in." "That is hard for me," said the woman, "for I must take back my apples, but there is one which I will give you," and she held up an apple. "No," said Snowdrop, "I dare not take it." "What, are you afraid of it?" cried the woman. "There, see, I will cut it in two, and you can have the red half, and I will take the white." The apple had been made so that the red side alone was poisoned. Snowdrop longed for the fruit, and when she saw the woman eat her half, she could not resist, but took the poisoned part. She took but one bite and fell down dead. The queen looked at her with cruel eyes and laughed. "The dwarfs will not be able to rouse you this time," she said. And when she reached home and went to her glass, it answered, "Thou art the fairest, Lady Queen." When the dwarfs came home, they tried all means to bring Snowdrop to life, but this time she seemed to be dead beyond recall. They laid her on a bier, and sat by her and wept for 3 days. They would have buried her, but she looked so fair and lifelike they could not bear to put her in the earth, so they had a case made of clear glass, in which one could view the body from all sides, and in this they placed her. Then they put the glass case upon the ledge of a rock, and one of them always stayed by to watch. Snowdrop lay in the case a long time, and showed no signs of decay. By and by, a young prince passed through the woods one day, and saw the case on the rock, and the fair girl within it. When he had looked at it, he said to the dwarfs, "Let me have this case, and I will pay you what you like for it." The dwarfs said, "We will not sell the case for all the gold in the world." But when they saw that the prince loved Snowdrop truly, they gave him the case. The prince had his servants lift it and take it away. As they went through the woods, one of the men stumbled, and the jar caused the piece of poisoned fruit to roll out of Snowdrop's mouth. Soon she opened her eyes, raised the top of the case, and sat up. "Where am I?" she cried. "You are with me," said the prince, full of joy, and he told her all that had come to pass. "You are more dear to me than all else in the world. Come with me to my father's palace, and be my wife." Snowdrop loved the kind young prince, and went with him, and soon after their marriage took place with great splendor. Snowdrop's stepmother was asked to the wedding, and when she was dressed in her fine clothes to go, she went to her glass and asked, "Mirror, mirror on the wall, who's the fairest one of all?" And it replied, "Thou wert the fairest, Lady Queen, the prince's bride is more fair, I ween." In her anger, the queen at first thought she would not go to the wedding, but in the end she could not resist her wish to see the bride. As soon as she entered, she knew Snowdrop, and in her rage and fear seemed rooted to the spot. Just then a pair of red hot iron shoes were brought with tongs and set in front of her, and these she was forced to put on and dance in till she fell down dead. End of chapter 14. Little Snowdrop.
The Fisherman and his Wife. Once upon a time there lived a fisherman and his wife in a poor small hut near the sea. Each day he went out to fish, and there he sat with his rod and looked at the sea. One day his line went deep, deep down, and when he drew it up there was a fine young fish at the end. The fish spoke to him and said, "Let me go, I pray you, fisherman. I am not a real fish, but a prince on whom a witch has cast a spell. What use shall I be to you if you pull me up? I should not taste well, and you could not eat me. Put me back in the sea and let me swim." "Well," said the man, "you need not make such a fuss. I have no use for a fish that can talk, so you may go back at once into the sea." With these words he threw it in the water, and it swam off. Then the man got up and went home to his wife. "Husband," said his wife, "have you caught no fish today?" "Oh, I caught one," said he, "but it was not a fish, but a prince, so I threw it back into the sea." "Did you not wish first?" she asked. "No," said he. "What should I wish for?" "What should you wish for?" she cried. "Why, that is too bad. Must we live all our days in this small mean hut? You might at least have asked for a better hut. Go back and call him, and say we want a nice neat cottage, and I am sure we shall get it." "How can I pay for it?" asked the man. "Pay for it?" said his wife. "Did you not catch the fish and then let it go? Be quick and ask for this, and he is sure to give it to you." The man did not like to go, but it was of no use to oppose his wife, so he went once more down to the sea, which was not so smooth as it had been before. He called the fish, and it swam up to him and asked, "What do you want?" "Oh," said the man, "because I caught you and let you go, my wife said I ought to have wished. She sent me back to ask for a small neat cottage in place of our poor hut." "Go home," said the fish. "She has it now." So the man went, and as he drew near his home, the hut was gone, and in its place stood a clean cottage, at the door of which his wife sat on a bench. She took him by the hand and said, "Come in and see if this is not much better." So they went in, and in the cottage there was a nice room with a fireplace in it, a bedroom with a soft white bed, a storeroom full of good things, and a kitchen fitted up with the best of tin and brassware. "See," said the wife, "is it not nice?" "Yes," said the man, "and it will stay so. Now let us be contented." "We will see about that," said the wife, and they went to bed. The wife was pleased for a while, but when she thought of the quickness with which her wish had been granted, she felt sad that she had not asked for more. At last she began to tease her husband to go and call the fish again and ask him for a large farmhouse. The man did not want to go. He thought the cottage was large enough, but his wife gave him no peace, and at length he went to the sea, called the fish, and told him his wife wanted a large farmhouse. "Go home," said the fish, "and you will find that she has obtained her wish." The man found the words of the fish true, but the wife did not stay pleased for long. She wished for something still more grand, and kept sending the man to the fish to ask, first that she might live in a stone castle, and then that the castle might be changed into a palace, and she be a queen, and then she might be an empress. Each time the fish gave her her wish, but each time the sea grew more rough and the clouds more black. At last there was no higher rank on earth for which the wife could wish, and she could not sleep for thinking what else to ask for. She rose at dawn and looked out of the window and saw the sun rise. "Why should I not make the sun and moon rise?" she thought, and she made the man go to the fish and say that she wished to rule the sun and the moon. When the fish was told of this mad wish, a fierce storm burst forth, and while the man stood trembling, he heard the fish say, "Go home, you will find her once more in her hut." And there she stayed for the rest of her days. End of The Fisherman and His Wife.
The Sleeping Beauty. Once on a time there lived a king and a queen who were sad because they had no child. At length, when years had gone by, they had their wish. A girl child was born to them, and their joy knew no bounds. The king, to show how pleased he was, gave a feast when the child was named, so grand that none like it had been seen up to that time. He asked all the fairies that could be found in the land to come to the feast, so that each might give the baby princess some choice gift, as was the way with good fairies in those days. When they sat down to the feast, there was set in front of each fairy a dish of pure gold set with rich gems, as well as a plate, knife, fork, and spoon of gold. But just as they took their seats, into the hall came an old fairy who had not been asked, because 20 years past she had gone off on a long trip, and had not since been heard of till this day. The king had a place made for her, but plain ware had to be put on for her, as but 7 of the gold sets had been made. The old fairy looked on this as a slight, and made some dire threats in a low voice. A young fairy who sat near her heard how she found fault, and feared she might give the child some evil gift. So she went and hid behind the hangings, so that she might speak last, and thus undo, as far as she could, the harm the old fairy might try to bring to pass. When the feast drew near its end, the 7 good fairies began to bestow their gifts on the child. The first wished that she might be good, the second that she might be wise, the third that she might be fair, and so on, till well nigh all good things that could be wished for had been given. Then the old fairy's turn came. She walked to the middle of the room, and with raised hand cried out, "My gift to the child is, that when she is 15 years old, she shall pierce her hand with a spindle, and die of the wound." Then she turned, went out of the hall, and was seen no more. Her awful gift put all in a fright, and the king and queen and all the court began to cry and weep. But the young fairy who had stayed behind the hangings now came forth. She could not undo in full the work of the old fairy, but she could make the doom of the princess less hard. "She shall not die," she said, "but a deep sleep shall fall on her, which shall last 100 years." To save his child from this sad fate, the king caused all the spindles in the land to be burnt. As the child grew up, all the good wishes of the fairies came true. She was fair, wise, and good, and was loved by all who knew her. It came to pass that on the day that she was 15 years old, the king and queen were not at home, and she was left to roam at will through the castle. She seized the chance to see parts of it in which she had never been before, and went from room to room till she came to an old tower. She went up the stairs till she came to a small door. She turned the key, the door flew open, and there in the room sat an old woman spinning flax. "How do you do, my good old lady?" said the princess. "What are you doing?" "I am spinning," said the woman. "What is that queer thing that flies round so fast?" asked the princess. And she took the spindle in her hand, as if she too would spin. She had no more than touched the spindle when the bad wish came true. The point of the spindle pricked her hand, and she fell back as if she were dead on a bed that stood near. At the same time a deep sleep fell on all in the castle. The king and queen, who had just come in, went to sleep in the hall, and all their suite with them. The beasts in their stalls, the doves on the roof, the flies on the wall, yes, and even the fire on the hearth, all ceased to stir and went to sleep. The meat stopped roasting, and the cook, who had raised his hand to cuff the boy who helped him, dropped his arm and went to sleep too. The wind died down, and not a leaf stirred on the trees near the castle. Soon a thick hedge of thorns sprang up, and grew so high as years passed, that it hid the castle from sight, and not so much as the flag that waved from the tower could be seen. But the tale of the sleeping Briar Rose, as the princess was called, spread through the land, and from time to time sons of kings tried to reach the castle, but one and all failed, for the thorns held them as if by hands, and the young men died there because they could not get free. Years and years passed, And another king's son came to that part of the land. An old man who lived near the hedge told him of the castle and the fair princess called Briar Rose, who had slept in it for 100 years, and with her the king and queen and all their court. The old man told him, too, how he had heard from his grandfather of the young men who had lost their lives trying to pierce the hedge. The young prince cried out, "I have no fear. I will find the fair Briar Rose." The good old man tried to talk him out of it, but he would not hear a word. Just at that time came the last day of the 100 years when Briar Rose would wake from her sleep. As the prince drew near the hedge, in place of thorns he saw only flowers. In the courtyard he saw the horses and dogs as they lay sleeping. He went in the castle. All was still. The flies slept on the wall. The cook, and near him the kitchen boy and the maid, all slept. He went on, and in the hall he found the courtiers sleeping, and near the throne lay the king and queen. He went from room to room, but heard no sound. At last he came to the room in the tower in which the princess was sleeping. He opened the door. There she lay, looking so fair he could not take his eyes from her. He stooped and kissed her. At this Briar Rose opened her eyes, woke up, and smiled at the prince. Hand in hand they went out of the tower. They found the king and queen and all the courtiers awake and staring one at another in surprise, and the whole castle was once more in motion as if nothing had occurred, for the 100 years of sleep had made no change in anyone. By and by there was a grand wedding. The young prince made Briar Rose his wife, and they lived full of joy to the end of their days. End of The Sleeping Beauty. Recording by Sharon Handy.
Chapter 17. The Cat Who Married a Mouse. The Cat Who Married a Mouse. Once upon a time there was a cat who made friends with a mouse, and talked so much to her of his love he had for her that at length she agreed to be his wife and keep house for him. "We must lay in a stock of food," said the cat, "so that I shall not have to go out when it storms. You must not stir out at all, for fear you may get caught in a trap." So he went out and bought a jar of fat and put it in the church. "I am sure no one will dare to steal it from there," said he, "and we will not touch it till we need it." But in a short time the cat began to long for it, and said to the mouse, "I have a friend who means to christen a son at the church today, and I wish to be there." "Oh, yes, go, by all means," said the mouse. What the cat said was not true. He had no friend at the church, but he went there and ate the top off the jar of fat. He went home at the end of the day, and the mouse asked him what name they gave the child. "Top off," said the cat. "Why, that is a strange name," said the mouse. "It is the first time I have heard such a name in my life." The cat soon began to long for some more of the fat. "I must leave you once more," he said to the mouse. "I have been asked again by a friend to see a child named." The mouse said, "All right." So the cat crept behind the wall to the church again, and ate the fat till the jar was not more than half full. "How nice a thing tastes when one eats it by oneself," he said, and he was well pleased with his day's work. When he came home the mouse asked what name they gave the child. "Half out," said the cat. "That is a strange name too," said the mouse. It was not long before the cat went to the church a third time and ate up all the fat. When he came home and the mouse asked the name of the child, he said, "All out." "That is the strangest name of all," said the mouse. It got cold and food was scarce. "Come," said the mouse, "let's go to our jar of fat now. It will taste good to us." "Yes, indeed it will," said the cat. "It will taste just if you stuck your fine little tongue out the window." They set out at once, and when they came to the church, there stood the jar, but no fat in it. "Oh," said the mouse, "now I can see what it all meant as clear as day. You are indeed a true friend. There was not a word of truth in what you said. You ate it all when you went to the church. First, top off, then half out, then say one more word and I will eat you too, said the cat. All out was on the tip of her tongue, but before the poor mouse could stop it came out. The cat made a spring, seized her, and put an end to her. And this, you will learn, is quite the way of the world. End of chapter 17.
Chapter 18. Clever Hans. One day Hans' mother saw him going away, so she asked him, "Where do you mean to go, Hans?" "To Grethel's," said Hans. "Well, act right, Hans." "I will take care. Good-bye, mother." "Good-bye, Hans." Then Hans came to Grethel. "Good day," said he. "Good day," said Grethel. "What have you brought me, Hans?" I have not brought a thing. Have you something to give me?" Grethel gave Hans a pin. "Good-bye," said he. "Good-bye, Hans." Hans took the pin, stuck it in a load of hay, and walked home behind the cart. When he got home, he said, "Good evening, mother." "Good evening, Hans. Where have you been?" "To Grethel's." "What did you give Grethel?" "Nothing, but Grethel gave me a pin." "And where have you put it?" "In a load of hay." "Oh, you should not have done that, Hans. You should have stuck it in your sleeve." "Oh, is that so? Well, I will do that next time." The next time Grethel gave Hans a knife. When he reached home, his mother asked, "What did you get this time, Hans?" "A knife," said Hans. "And where did you put it?" "In my sleeve." You should not have done that, Hans. You should put knives in your pocket." "Oh, is that so? Well, I will do that next time." Hans soon went again to Grethel's, and Grethel gave him a young goat. He tied its legs, put it in his pocket, and just as he reached home it died for want of air. His mother asked, "What did you get this time, Hans?" "A goat." "And where did you put it, Hans?" "In my pocket." "Oh, you should not have done that, Hans. You should have tied it with a rope and led it home." "Is that so? Well, I will do that next time." The next time Grethel gave Hans a piece of pork. Hans took the pork, tied it with a rope, and swung it to and fro. Then the dogs came and ate it up. When he reached home, he held nothing but the rope in his hand. His mother asked, "What did you get this time, Hans?" "A piece of pork." "And where did you put it?" "I tied it with a rope, swung it to and fro, and the dogs came and ate it up." "You should have carried it on your head." "Is that so? Well, I will do that next time." The next time Grethel gave Hans a calf. He set the calf on his head, and it kicked him in the face. When he told his mother of it, she said, "Oh, you should not have done that, Hans. You should have led the calf home and put it in the stall." "Is that so? Well, I will do that next time." The next time he went to see Grethel, she said she would go home with him. So he put the rope around her neck, led her home, and tied her in the stall. When his mother asked him what he had brought this time, he said, "I brought home Grethel herself." "And where have you left her?" "I tied her with a rope, put her in the stall, and threw in some grass." "You did not act right, Hans. You should have cast sheep's eyes at her." "Is that so? Well, I will do that now." So Hans went to the barn, took all the eyes out of the sheep, and threw them in Grethel's face. That made Grethel so cross that she broke loose, ran away, and became the bride of someone else. End of chapter 18. Clever Hans.
Chapter 19. The Wedding of Mrs. Fox. Once upon a time there was a fox who had 9 tails. One day he took it into his head to play a trick on his wife, and by means of it find out how fond she was of him. So he laid himself out on a bench, and kept as stiff and still as if he were dead. Mrs. Fox felt quite sad when she found him, and went to her room and shut herself in, leaving the house in charge of her maid, a young cat. The news spread that Mr. Fox was dead, and it was not long before there was a knock at the door. The maid went to the door, and saw there a fine young fox, who asked, "Is Mrs. Fox in?" The maid said, "She is so full of grief for her husband that she stays in her room and will see no one. If you wish to send word to her, you must tell me what it is." "All right," said the fox. "Go and tell her that a young fox has come to woo her." Upstairs goes the cat, pit-pat, pit-pat. She knocks at the door, rat-a-tat, rat-a-tat. "Are you there, Mrs. Fox?" "Yes, my dear good cat," said Mrs. Fox. "There is a young fox downstairs, come to woo you." "What does he look like?" asked Mrs. Fox. "Has he 9 fine tails, like my poor dead husband?" "Oh no," said the maid, "he has but 1. "Then I will not have him," said Mrs. Fox. So the cat went down and sent the fox off. But soon came a second tap at the door, from a fox who had 2 tails, and wished to woo Mrs. Fox. His fate was the same as that of the first one. Then came 6 more, one at a time, each with 1 tail more than he who came before him, but they were all sent off. But at last came a fox who had 9 fine tails, like the dead one. When Mrs. Fox heard of it, she said, full of joy, to the cat, "Now you may open wide the windows and doors, and turn the old fox out of the house." But just then the old fox roused from his sleep on the bench, and beat the whole lot of them, his wife and all, till he drove them out of the house. Second Tale. When old Mr. Fox died, a wolf came to the door and knocked, and the cat who was maid to Mrs. Fox went to the door. "Good day, Miss Cat," he said. "How does it come to pass that you are alone? Is Mrs. Fox not at home?" "She stays in her room, and neither eats nor drinks nor sleeps. She is so full of grief for Mr. Fox." Then the wolf said, "If she would like to wed a second time, she ought to come down and see me." So the cat ran up the stairs and through the hall, till she came to Mrs. Fox's room. She knocked 5 times on the door, and asked, "Is Mrs. Fox at home? If so, and she would like to wed a second time, she must come downstairs, for a wolf who would woo her is at the door." Mrs. Fox asked, "Does he wear red stockings, and has he a pointed nose?" "No," said the cat. "Then I will not have him," said Mrs. Fox, and she shut the door. The wolf was sent off, and then there came in turn a dog, a stag, a hare, a bear, and a horse, but they all had the same ill luck. At last a young fox came, and when Mrs. Fox asked, "Has he red stockings and a pointed nose?" the cat said, "Yes." She was told to let him in and prepare for the wedding. Then they threw the old fox out of the door, and the cat caught and ate all the mice she could in honour of the glad event. And after the marriage they had a grand ball, and for all I know they are dancing still. End of Chapter 19. The Wedding of Mrs. Fox. Recording by Shakira.
Chapter 20. Cinderella. There was once a rich man's wife who was quite ill, and as she felt that her end was near, she called her one daughter to her bedside and said, "My dear child, be a good girl, and the dear God will take care of you, and I will look down on you from heaven and think of you." Soon after this, she died. Each day the girl went to her mother's grave and wept. She kept her last words in mind, and was good and kind to all around her. Winter came and clothed the earth in a soft white robe. But when the warm rays of spring had caused the snow to melt from the mother's grave, the husband took a new wife. The wife brought home with her 2 daughters of her own, who were fair in face, but black and mean at heart. Now came a sad time for the poor stepchild. "Is the goose to sit in the same room with us?" said the 2 daughters. "They who eat bread must earn it. Out with you. Go help the kitchen maid." They took off her clothes and gave her an old gray dress and shoes of wood. She had to stay in the kitchen and work hard all day. At night, when she was tired, she had no bed to lie on, but must lie down in the cinders on the hearth. This gave her such a dirty look that the sisters, who were always glad to have a chance to insult her, called her Cinderella. One day the father wished to go to the fair, so he asked his 2 stepdaughters what he should bring them. "A fine dress," said one. "Pearls and jewels," said the other. "And you, Cinderella," said he, "what shall I bring you?" "The first twig that hits your hat on your way home, father. Break off and bring to me," said she. So he brought the dress and the pearls for his stepdaughters, and on his way home, as he rode through a wood, a hazel bough struck his hat, and he broke it off and took it with him. Cinderella thanked him for the twig, and went at once to plant it on her mother's grave. The poor girl wept long, and her tears fell like water on the twig, so that it grew to a tree. 3 times a day Cinderella went to it to weep and pray, and each time a little white bird flew on the tree, and if she spoke a wish out loud, the bird threw down what she wished for. After a time it fell out that the king made up his mind to give a grand ball. It was to last 3 days, and all the fair young ladies of the land were asked to come, that the king's son might choose from them a bride. When the 2 stepsisters heard that they might go, they were glad. They called Cinderella and said, "Comb our hair, brush our shoes, and hook our gowns, for we are to go to the ball at the king's palace." Cinderella did as they told her, but wept to think that she too could not go to the ball. She asked her stepmother to let her go with them, but the stepmother mocked her and said, "You, Cinderella, black with dirt and soot, you have no clothes or shoes, and how can you dance?" But Cinderella still begged to be let go. So at last the stepmother said, "I have just thrown a dish of flaxseed into the ashes. If you will have it all picked out in 2 hours, you may go with them." Then Cinderella ran out at the back door into the garden and called out, "You tame doves and all you birds of the air, come and help me pick up the seeds. Put the good ones in the pot and the bad ones in your crop." Then there flew in at the kitchen window 2 white doves, and then all the birds of the air came chirping in down upon the ashes. They then began to pick, 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 and soon all the good seeds were gathered in the dish. With great joy Cinderella took the dish to her stepmother. But the stepmother said, "No, Cinderella, you have no clothes, and you do not know how to dance. All would laugh at you." Still Cinderella cried and begged to go, and at last the stepmother said, "I will throw twice as much flaxseed in the ashes, and if you have it all picked up in 1 hour, I will let you go." But she thought to herself, "She cannot do that." The birds again helped Cinderella, and the seed was all picked up in half an hour. But when she went to the stepmother, she broke her word once more, and would not let her go. When the two proud sisters and their mother had gone to the ball, Cinderella went out to her mother's grave and sat down under the hazel tree and cried, "Rustle and shake, dear little tree, gold and silver throw over me." Then the bird threw down a dress of gold and silver and a pair of small silk slippers worked with silver. These Cinderella put on in great haste, and then she went to the ball. Her stepmother and sisters did not know her, and thought it must be some strange princess, so grand did she look in her fine dress. The prince met her as she came in, and led her through the dance, nor would he dance with any one else all the evening. When it grew late, and she wished to go home, the prince said, "I will go with you, and see you safe," for he wished to find out to whom she belonged. They reached a hen house, and Cinderella sprang into it, so the prince waited till her father came home. He told him a strange maiden had run into the pigeon house, and an axe was brought to break into the house, but no one was there. When they came to the house, there lay Cinderella in her dirty frock, for she had jumped out of the hen house on the far side, and run to the hazel tree, where she had left her fine dress for the bird to take away. The next day, Cinderella went to the tree again, when the stepmother and sisters had gone to the ball, and a dress more grand and rich than the first was thrown down to her. The prince danced with her again all the evening. When she went home, he followed her, but when she reached a pear tree that grew near her father's house, he lost sight of her. When the father came home, the prince told him that the strange maiden had again fled from him, and that he thought she was in the pear tree. The father thought, could it have been Cinderella? He cut down the tree with an axe, but no one was to be found. When they went into the house, Cinderella was in her place, for she had sprung down on the far side of the pear tree, left her fine dress with the bird, and put on her old gray frock. On the third day she went again to the ball. This time the bird threw down the most splendid dress of all, and the slippers were of pure gold. The prince danced only with Cinderella, and when the time came to leave he would have gone with her, but she ran with such speed that he could not keep up with her. But the prince had the steps spread with pitch, in hopes to catch the strange maiden, and as Cinderella ran, her left slipper stuck to the pitch and came off. The prince picked it up and saw that it was small and of pure gold. The next day he went to Cinderella's father and said, "My bride shall be the one whose foot this slipper fits." The two sisters were glad when they heard this, for they had small feet. The elder one took the slipper first, and went to her room to try it on, but she could not get her big toe into it. The mother who stood by said, "Cut off your toe, for when you are queen you will not need to go on foot." The daughter cut off her toe, squeezed her foot into the slipper, and hiding her pain, went down to the prince. Then he placed her as his bride upon his horse and rode off. But as they passed the grave of Cinderella's mother, two white doves sat on the hazel tree and cried, "Turn and look, turn and look. There's blood upon the shoe. The shoe's too small, and she behind is not the bride for you." He turned and looked at her foot, and saw the blood that flowed from the shoe. He turned his horse at once, and took the false bride home, saying she was not the right one, that the other sister must try the slipper on. The younger one took it to her room, and to her joy her toes went in, but she could not get the slipper over her heel. The mother said, "Cut off a piece of your heel, for when you are queen you need not go on foot." The daughter did so, squeezed her foot into the slipper, and went down to the prince. Then he put her upon his horse as his bride, and rode off. But they too must pass the hazel tree, where the two doves sat. Again they cried, "Turn and look, turn and look. There's blood upon the shoe. The shoe's too small, and she behind is not the bride for you." He looked down at her foot, and saw that the blood was trickling from her shoe. He turned his horse once more, and brought the false bride home. "This is not the right one," he said to the father. "Have you no other daughter?" "No," said the father, "except the daughter of my first wife, but she cannot be the bride." The prince asked to see her, but the stepmother said, "Oh, no, she is much too dirty. I dare not let her be seen." But the prince would have his way, and Cinderella was called. She washed her hands and face, and went in, bowing to the prince, who gave her the gold slipper. She sat down and put on the slipper, which was a perfect fit for her. The prince looked in her face and saw that she was the fair maiden with whom he had danced, so he said, "This is my true bride." The stepmother and two sisters turned white with rage, but the prince took Cinderella upon his horse and rode off. As they came to the hazel tree, the two white doves cried, "Turn and look, turn and look, there's no blood upon the shoe. It fits so nice, and she behind is the rightful bride for you." Cinderella and the prince were soon married, and all went well with them to the end of their lives. End of chapter 20. Cinderella.
Chapter 21. A Set of Rogues. One day in fall, the cock said to the hen, "Now is the time when the nuts are ripe. Let us go up there on the hill and eat what we want before the squirrel gets them all." "Oh, yes," said the hen, "let us go. It will be fine fun." So they went to the hill, and as it was a fine day, they stayed till night. It may have been that they ate too much, or that they grew proud. At all events, they would not walk home, so the cock had to make a small cart of nutshells. When it was made, the hen sat in it, and said to the cock, "Now you may draw me home." "You are too kind," said the cock. "I would do quite as well to go home on foot alone. I will be willing to sit on the box and drive, but draw the coach I will not." At this point a duck that was there quacked out, "You thieves! Who said you could come to my nut hill? You shall pay dear for this!" And she rushed at the cock to strike him with her bill. But he stood his ground, and struck her so hard with his spurs that she soon begged for mercy, and let herself be hitched to the cart to make up for her rudeness. The cock took his seat on the box, and off they drove, the cock crying out, "Run, duck, run as fast as you can." When they had gone a short part of the way, they met two footmen, a pin and a needle. "Stop, stop," they cried. "Why won't you let us ride with you? It will soon be so dark that we cannot see a step in front of us." As the cock saw that they were so thin that they would not take up much room, he said they might get in if they would not step on the hen's toes. When it was quite dark, they came to an inn, and they thought they would stop for the night. The man who kept the inn did not want them for guests, but they said they would give him the egg which the hen laid on the road, and the one the duck would lay in the morning, so he told them at last they might stay. Next day at dawn, the cock and hen ate the egg the first thing, and threw the shell into the fire. Then they took the needle and stuck her in the seat of a chair. The pin they put in the towel, and then they both left the house. The duck, who had slept in the yard, heard them as they flew past, and went down to the brook and swam away. When the man who kept the inn rose, he washed his face, and then took the towel to dry it, but he drew the point of the pin across it, and left a long scratch from ear to ear. Then he went to the fire to light his pipe, and the eggshell popped into his eyes. That vexed him, and he sat down in the chair. He at once sprang into the air, for the needle had pricked him worse than the pin had scratched him. He was now in a rage, and as he thought the guests who had come so late in the night must be to blame, he ran to look for them, and found they were gone. Then he made a vow that this would be the last time he would let such a set of rogues into his house, folks who ate so much, paid nothing, and for thanks played mean tricks. End of chapter 21. A Set of Rogues.
Little Redcap. Once on a time there was on a farm, close to a small town, a girl who was as sweet a child as there is in the whole world. Her mother, of course, had a great deal of love for her, and her grandmother was still more fond of her. The good dame made for her, one day, a bright red hood. It was just the right size for her, and it made her look so sweet that they gave her the name of Little Redcap. One day when her mother had made some cheesecakes, she said to her, "Go, my child, and see how your grandmother does, for I hear she is ill. Take her some of these cakes and a pat of butter." Little Redcap, with a small basket on her arm, in which were the cakes her mother had made, and the pat of butter, set out straight for her grandmother's house, which was in a small town not far from where Little Redcap's mother had her home. As she went through a wood which lay in her road, she met a large wolf, which had a great mind to eat her up, but did not dare to for fear of some men who were at work at a tree, which they had to cut down in the wood, not far from where Little Redcap and the wolf were. The wolf spoke to her and told her he would like to know where she meant to go with her basket. The child, who did not know that it was not wise to stop and speak to a wolf, and said, "I am on my way to see my grandmother. My mother gave me these cakes and this pat of butter to take to her, for we have heard that she is ill." "Does she live a great way off?" said the wolf. "Oh yes," said Little Redcap. "The mill that you see there hides her house from us. It is the first house in the town." "Well," said the wolf, "we will have a race. I will take this way and you may take that. We will see which will be there first." The wolf set out at full speed and ran as fast as he could all the way. The way he took was not much more than half as long as the way Little Redcap took, and as she went on, from time to time she knelt down on the ground to pick up nuts. Then she would run to try and catch the young hares that ran near her, and she made a gay bunch of wild pinks. The wolf got first to the house of the grandmother and gave a loud knock at the door. "Who is there?" said a voice in the house. "It is Little Redcap," said the wolf, and he tried to make his great gruff voice sound like the sweet voice of the child. "I have brought you a small pat of butter and some nice cheesecakes that mother has just made, for she heard that you were ill." The good old dame, who was ill in bed, cried out, "Pull the string and the latch will fly up." The wolf gave a hard pull at the string, and up went the latch. He went in and up to the poor old grandmother's room, sprang on the bed and ate her up in a trice, for it was 3 days since he had had a meal. The wolf put on the good old dame's nightcap and dress, shut the door of the room, and then lay down in the bed to wait for Little Redcap. He had not been long in bed when she came to the house. Tap, tap. "Who is there?" cried he. At first she was full of fear when she heard the gruff voice of the wolf, but she thought it might be that her grandmother had a cold, so she said, "It is I, it is Little Redcap. Mother has sent you some cheesecakes and a small pat of butter." The wolf made his voice as soft as he could, and he cried out, "Pull the string and the latch will fly up." Little Redcap gave a pull to the string and up went the latch. When she came upstairs to her grandmother's room, the wolf kept quite hid in the bed. Then he tried to speak as if he were ill and quite weak, and said, "Put the basket on the stool, my dear, and take off your clothes and come to me in the bed." Little Redcap, who at all times did just as she was bid, at once took off her clothes and went to bed. But when she came to see the wolf nearby, she thought her grandmother did not look like herself at all. "Dear me, grandmother," she said, "what great big arms you have got." "The better to hug you, my child," said the wolf. "But, grandmother," said Redcap, "what great big ears you have got." "The better to hear you, my child," said the wolf. "But then, grandmother, what great big eyes you have got," said Redcap. "The better to see you, my child," said the wolf. "And, oh, grandmother, what great big teeth you've got," said the poor child, who by this time was full of fear. "The better to eat you up," said the wolf with a fierce growl, and with one leap he sprang out of the bed, seized Little Redcap, and was about to eat her up, when a shot was heard, and the wolf fell dead. A hunter who had come that way heard the voices in the house and looked through the window in time to see the danger the child was in. In a trice he had aimed and fired his gun, and thus Little Redcap's life was saved. End of chapter 22.
Chapter 23. Rumpelstilskin. There was once a miller who was as poor could be, but he had a daughter who was quite fair of face. One day he chanced to meet the king, and as he felt like boasting, he said, "I have a girl that can spin gold out of straw." The king said to him, "This is an art in which few have skill. If your child is as smart as you say, bring her to my castle in a day or two, and I will try what she can do." When the girl was brought to the king, he led her to a room that was full of straw, and gave her a wheel with which to spin. "Now go to work," he said. "If you do not spin all this straw into gold in one day, you shall die." With these words he shut the door and left her there. She could not see how she was to save her life, for she did not know how to spin gold out of straw. She thought a long time, and her fear and grief were so great that she wept. Then all at once the door opened, and in came a tiny dwarf. "Why do you weep, my poor child?" he asked. "Oh," said the girl, "I have got to spin gold out of this straw, but I do not know how."
"What will you give me," asked the dwarf, "if I spin it for you?"
"My gold chain," said the girl. The dwarf took the chain and then sat down at the wheel. Whir, 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 3 times round went the wheel, and the spool was full. He put on another, and whir, 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 that one was full. And so on all through the night, till the straw was all gone and all the spools full of gold. When the king came and saw it, he was glad, but his heart was full of greed for gold, and he took the girl to a room in which was more straw. "You must spin this, too, in one day," he said, "or lose your life." The girl was full of grief, but as she wept, the door opened, and in came the dwarf, who said, "What will you give me if I spin the straw into gold?" "My ring," said the girl. The dwarf took the ring and went to work. He spun all night, and then the straw was all changed to gold. The king was full of joy, but still wished for more gold. He led the girl to another room full of straw, and said, "All this you must spin to night. If you do so, I will make you my wife." When the girl was alone, the dwarf came for a third time, and asked, "What will you give me if I spin it for you?" "I have nothing left to give you," said the girl. "Then you will have to give me your first child when you are queen," he said. The girl said she would do so, and the dwarf set to work and soon spun the gold. When the king came and found all he wished for done, he was pleased, and made the girl his wife at once. In a year, by which time she had ceased to think of the dwarf, she had a child. But in a few days the dwarf came to her room and said, "Now give me what you said you would." In great fright, the queen said she would give him all her wealth if he would leave the child to her, but he said he would not. The queen wept and groaned so much at this that the dwarf at length felt sorry for her. So he said, "I will give you 3 days, and if in that time you find out my name, you shall keep your child." All night long the queen racked her brains for all the names she could think of, and when the dwarf came the next day, she told him a lot, but at each the dwarf said, "That is not my name." The next day when the dwarf came, she had more names, but to all he still said, "It is not my name." Then she sent out a man through the land to see if he could find names that she had not yet used. When he came back, he said, "I found no names, but as I came to a high hill near the edge of the wood, I saw a small house, in front of which burned a fire, and round this a small old man danced on one leg and sang, "Today I brew, and then I bake, tomorrow I shall the queen's child take. Oh, how glad I am that no one knows that Rumpelstilskin is my name." When the queen heard this, she was full of joy. The dwarf came the next day and said, "Now, my lady queen, what is my name?" First she said, "Is it John?" "No," he said. "Is it James?" "No." "Maybe it is Rumpelstilskin." "A witch told you! A witch told you!" he screamed, and stamped his foot so hard in the ground that he sank in up to his waist. Then in a great rage he took hold of his left leg with both hands to pull himself out, and pulled so hard that he tore himself in 2. So that was the end of him, and the queen kept her child. End of chapter 23. Rumpelstilskin. The 12 Brothers. Once on a time there lived a king and queen who had 12 boys. One day the king said to the queen, "If our next child should be a girl, our 12 sons must die so that she may have the crown." The queen was sad and mourned all day and night. One day the youngest boy, who was with her all the time, asked, "Dear mother, why are you so sad?" The queen would not tell at first, but he kept on asking, and at last she told him that he and his brothers were to be put to death in case they had a sister. He said, "Do not weep, dear mother. I and my brothers will go from here, so that we may not be put to death." The queen said, "Yes, go. Stay in the woods near by, and if a son is born, I will hang out a white flag, so that you may know that it is safe for you to come home. But if it is a girl, I will hang out a red flag, and then you must all fly hence as fast as you can. I will pray each night that you meet with no ill luck." Then the 12 boys went to the woods. Each kept watch in turn from the top of a tall oak tree, One day they saw a red flag hung out, which meant that a girl was born, and they must all die if they went home. Then they went deep into the woods, and there found a small house which they made their home. For food they shot hares and birds, and what else they could find. 10 years passed, and by that time the queen's child had grown to be quite a big girl. She was fair of face and had a kind heart. Once, when there was a great wash, she saw 12 shirts on the line, and asked her mother, "Whose are those 12 shirts? They are too small for my father." The queen said with a sad heart, "My dear child, they belong to your 12 brothers." "Where are my 12 brothers? This is the first I have heard of them," said the child. Then the queen told her why she had not seen them, and she wept as she did so. "Do not cry, dear mother," said the child. "I will go forth and seek my brothers." She took the 12 shirts and set forth for the wood at once. All day she walked on, and at night she came to the hut where her brothers lived. She went in, and there she saw a young lad who asked her, "Whence do you come, and what do you want?" She said, "I am a child of the king, and I seek my 12 brothers, and will go as far as the sky is blue till I find them." Then she showed him the 12 shirts she had with her, and he knew it must be his sister, and told her who he was. At his words she wept for joy, and he wept too. When the rest of the brothers came home, they were glad to find their sister there, and they kissed her and loved her with all their hearts. She stayed at home with one of the brothers, and took care of the house and the cooking, while the rest went to catch game in the woods. One day she got up a fine feast. Near the house was a small garden in which grew 12 lilies. She thought it would please her brothers if she gave each of them a flower, so she broke off the 12 lilies. But as she did so, the 12 boys were changed into 12 crows and flew off. The house too was gone, and the girl stood alone in a wild wood. All at once she saw an old woman who said, "My child, what have you done? The 12 lilies were your brothers, and now they have become crows and will stay so." The girl wept and asked, "Is there no way to set them free?" "There is but one thing in all the world," said the old woman, "and that is too hard for you to do. You must be dumb for 6 years. If you speak as much as one word, or laugh in all that time, you cannot free them." Then the girl said in her heart, "I know I shall set my brothers free." She found a tall tree in which she could live, and here she sat and spun, but did not speak or laugh. One day a king rode by, who had a dog with him, and it ran to the tree where the girl was, and barked. The king came up, and as soon as he saw the fair girl, he fell in love with her, and asked if she would be his bride. She made no answer except to nod her head. Then the king himself climbed the tree, brought her down, and rode off with her to his palace. The wedding soon took place with great pomp, but the bride did not speak or laugh. 2 years that were full of joy passed, but one day the king's stepmother, who was not a good woman, began to speak ill of the young queen. "This is some low girl that you have made your wife," she said. "Who knows for what crime she may have been turned out of her home? If she is dumb and can't speak, she might at least laugh. One that does not laugh must have something bad on her mind." The king would not hear her at first, but the old woman talked so much that at last she made the king think as she did, and the queen was doomed to death. She was bound to a stake, and a great fire was made in which she was to burn. But just as the flames rose to scorch her, the 6 years in which she was to be dumb came to an end. She heard a great whir in the air, and when she looked up, she saw 12 crows that flew toward her. The instant they touched the earth, they were changed to her 12 brothers, whom she had set free. They ran up to the fire, and drew the wood from the pile and put out the flames. And now that she could speak and laugh, she told the king why she had been dumb for 6 years. The king was glad to find out the truth, and now he loved his wife more than at first. They lived in great joy all their lives, but the bad stepmother met the death to which she had tried to send the queen. End of chapter 24. The 12 Brothers.
Hans in Luck Hans had worked for a man for 6 long years, and at the end of that time he said, "Sir, my time is up, and I wish to go home, so please give me my pay." "You have served me well," said the man, "so you shall have a good sum for your pay." And he gave him a lump of gold as big as his head. Hans put the gold in a cloth and slung it on his back, and went on his way home. He met a man on a horse, and he said to him that he wished he could ride too. "It is as if one sat in a chair, and yet one gets on," he told the man. "Well," said the man, "you need not walk. You can have my horse if you give me that gold." "I will do it, and thank you," said Hans. The man took the gold and helped Hans to get up on the horse. "When you want to go fast," said the man, "you have just to click your tongue and say, 'Get up.'" Hans went on for a while at a slow gait, but then he thought he would like to try the speed of his horse, so he began to click his tongue and say, "Get up." The horse set off at a smart trot, and the first thing Hans knew, he was pitched into a ditch that ran on the side of the road. The horse made a start to run, and would have got away if it had not been caught by a man who came by leading a cow. Hans said he wished he had that cow in place of a beast that kicked and plunged so that a man was likely to break his neck. "Well," said the man, "I will give it to you for your horse." Hans said, "All right," and the man got on the horse and was soon out of sight. Hans was full of joy as he drove his cow along. "I can now always have butter and cheese with my bread," said he, "and if I am dry, I need but to milk my cow, and I shall have milk to drink." The day grew hot, and Hans got dry. "Now is the time," he thought, "to milk my cow, and put an end to my thirst with a good drink of milk." He tried to milk the cow, but no milk would come, and soon she gave him such a kick that he fell on the ground, and for a long time he knew not where he was. At length a man came by with a pig, and helped Hans to his feet. Hans told him all that had passed, and he held out a flask and said, "Here, take a drink. Your cow might well give no milk. She is an old beast, and good but for meat at the best." "Well, well," said Hans, "who would have thought it? For my part, I don't like cow's flesh. It's too tough. But a young pig like yours is the thing that tastes right." "Well, now, for love of you," said the man, "I will let you have my pig for your cow." "Oh, God bless you for your kind heart," said Hans, and he gave up the cow and took in his hand the string with which the pig was led. On he went full of joy. Soon he met a boy with a goose, and stopped to have a talk with him. The boy told him he was taking the goose to a house where there was to be a feast. "Just lift it," said he, "and feel the weight of it." "Yes," said Hans, "it is fine, but my pig has some flesh on it too." As he spoke, the boy gave sharp looks, first on the side and then on that, and at length he broke out, "I fear all is not right with that pig of yours. In the town I just came through, a man had lost one of his pigs, and it seemed to me this might be it. If they find you with it, they will think that you stole it, and put you in jail." Hans turned pale with fright. "You know the roads in these parts better than I do," said he. "Do you take my pig, and let me have your goose?" "It will be a risk for me," said the boy, "but still, I want to save you from harm." And as he said that, he took the rope in his own hand and drove the pig off by a side path, while Hans, glad to be out of his scrape, walked on with the goose tucked under his arm. As he came near the last town on his way home, he saw a man whose trade it was to grind knives. He had a grindstone on a truck, and as he went on with his work, his wheel hummed, and he sang a gay tune. "My wheel I turn, and the knives I grind, while gaily my cloak flies out behind." Hans stopped to look at him, and at length said, "Your trade must be a good one, since you sing at your work." "Yes," said the man, "this work pays well. A man who grinds knives is one who finds gold in his purse each time he puts his hand in it. But where did you get that fine goose, if I may ask you?" "I gave my pig for it," said Hans. "And the pig?" I gave my cow for it, and the cow I gave my horse for her, and the horse, for him I gave a lump of gold as big as my head, and the gold, that was my pay for 6 years of work. You have done well for yourself, to be sure," said the man. "Now, if you were like me, and could find gold in your purse each time you put your hand in it, you would be a made man." "How shall I do that?" asked Hans. "All you want is a stone to grind knives on. I have one that is not quite new, so I will let you have it if you will give me your goose. Would that suit you?" "Oh, how can you ask me?" said Hans. "I will do it with joy. If I can find gold in my purse each time I put my hand in it, what else shall I have to care for?" And he gave the man the goose and took the stone from him. "Now," said the man, as he took up a plain field stone which lay near, "there is a fine stone which will be just the thing to hammer your old nails straight on. Take it with you too." Hans raised the stone and marched off in great glee. "I must have been born to a heap of good luck," said he, "for all things turn out just as I wished to have them." But he had been on his legs since daybreak, and the weight of the stone soon made him tired and weak. He could not keep out of his mind the thought, "How nice it would be now if I had not these to drag with me." Just then he came to a well and thought he must stop to have a drink. He set the stones down by the brink of the well and stooped down to drink. As he did so, he gave the stones, by chance, a slight push, and they fell in the well. As he saw them go down, Hans gladly sprang up, and then, with tears of joy in his eyes, fell on his knees to give thanks that in so nice a way, and with no fault on his part, he had got rid of the load that had made him so tired. And then, with a light heart and free from all care, he ran on at the top of his speed till he reached his home. End of chapter 25. Recording by Kathy Hulick.
Chapter 26. The Mouse, the Bird, and the Sausage. Once on a time a mouse, a bird, and a sausage struck up a friendship, and all lived in peace in one house. It was the work of the bird to go to the woods each day and fetch wood. The mouse brought the water and made the fire, while the sausage stayed at home and cooked the meals. There are few so well off that they do not long for something better, and thus it was with the bird. One day he met a bird on the way to the wood, whom told him about the way he lived, and that bird said to him that he was a fool to do so much hard work while the mouse and the sausage had such a good time at home. "For," said he, "when the mouse has brought the water and made the fire, she can go to her room and rest till called to the table, and the sausage has but to sit by the stove and see that the food is well cooked. When it is meal time, he dips himself into the pans 3 or 4 times, and thus each dish is seasoned right for the table." The bird heard him and went home. He laid down his pack of wood, and they all sat down, ate a good meal, and then went to bed and slept till dawn. But the next day the bird would not go for wood. He said he had been their slave long enough. He was a fool to have done so much work. There must be a change. Some plan that was more fair must be tried. The mouse and the sausage found fault with these words, but the bird was the master. So they drew lots, and it fell to the sausage to fetch wood, the mouse to cook, and the bird to bring the water. What took place? The sausage went for the wood, the bird made the fire, and the mouse put on the pot, and then they two sat down to wait for the sausage to come back with the wood for the next day. But the sausage was gone so long they feared he must have met with ill luck, So the bird went to meet him. Not far off he met a dog who owned up that he had eaten the sausage. The bird felt sad at this and took up the wood and went home. He told the mouse all he had seen and heard, and they grieved over the loss of their friend, but they thought they would try to make the best of it. So the bird set the table while the mouse fixed the food. She wished to season the broth as she had seen the sausage do, so she swung herself into the pot, but her hair and skin came off at once, and she lost her life. When the bird came to dish up the food, no cook was to be seen. He threw the wood on all sides in his search, but she was not to be found. The bird took no care where he threw the wood, and some fell on the fire and began to blaze. He flew for some water. As he stooped in haste over the brook, the pail fell in, and he was pulled in with it and drowned. Let well enough alone. End of The Mouse, the Bird, and the Sausage. Chapter 27. The Fox and the Cat. One day a cat met a fox in the woods, and thought, "Mr. Fox is so smart and wise, and has such a name in the world, I think I will speak to him." So she said, "Good day, Mr. Fox. How is your health? How do you fare these hard times?" But the fox, who was as proud as he could be, looked at the cat from head to toe, as if he thought he ought not to speak to her. At length he said, "Oh, you poor whisker cleaner, you starved mouse hunter, what ails you? You dare to ask how I fare? What tricks do you know?" "I know but one," said the cat. "And what is that?" said the fox. "When the dogs chase me, I spring into a tree and thus save my life," said the cat. "Is that all you know?" said the fox. "I know 100 tricks, and more than this, have a sack full of cunning. But I feel sad for you. Come with me, and I will teach you how to escape from the dogs." Just then the hunters came up with their dogs. The cat sprang into a tree, sat herself in the boughs, and was quiet, hidden by the leaves. "Open the sack, Mr. Fox," she called to the fox, but the dog had seized him and held him fast. "Ah, Mr. Fox," she called once more, "your 100 tricks are not of much use to you. If you had but been able to crawl up here, you might have saved your life." End of The Fox and the Cat. Chapter 28. The Old Man and His Grandson. Once there was an old man whose eyes were dim, his ears deaf, and his hands shook so that he could not guide his food to his mouth, but what he held was spilled on the table and on his clothes. His son and his son's wife were ill pleased at this, and at last they made him sit in a corner and eat out of an earthen dish. Once his poor old hands could not even hold the dish, and it fell to the floor and broke. Then the wife scolded, and they bought him a dish of wood and gave him his meals in that. One day, as they sat at the table, their 4-year-old boy brought in some small boards and tried to nail them together. "What do you wish to make?" asked the father. "A little trough for you and mother to eat out of when I grow big," said the child. The man and the wife looked at each other while they began to cry. The child had taught them a lesson. After this, the old man came to the table, and not a word was said, even if he did spill some of his food on the cloth. End of The Old Man and His Grandson.
Chapter 29. Old Sultan. There was once a man who had a good dog called Sultan. He was so old he had lost all his teeth, and so could not seize or hold any thing. One day the man said to his wife, as they stood at the door of the house, "Old Sultan is of no use now. I mean to shoot him in the morning." His wife felt sad for the poor dog, and said, "He has been a good dog all these years. We ought to give him food and a home in his old age." "What is that?" said the man. "Are you out of your mind? He has not a tooth in his head. He's no use as a watch dog. Now he can go. He may have served us well, but for that we have fed him all his life." The poor dog, who lay in the sun not far from the door, heard all this talk, and felt sad to know that the next day would be the last of his life. He had one good friend out in the woods, and that was the wolf. And now he went to see him and tell him what he had to face. "Don't feel bad, old chap," said the wolf. "I can help you in your need. At dawn the man and his wife will go out to make hay, and will take their child along, since there is no one at home to take care of it. While they are at work, they will place the child in the hedge. You must lie down near it as if to watch it. I will rush out of the woods, seize the child, and drag it off. You must spring at me as if you would tear it from me. I will let it fall, and you can bring it back to the man and his wife. They will think you have saved its life, and feel they owe you so much that they will not want to see you come to harm." The dog liked this plan, and it was done. The man was full of grief when he saw the wolf run through the field with his child. But when old Sultan brought it back, he was glad, and he stroked his back and said, "Not a hair of you shall be harmed. You shall be fed and cared for as long as you live." Then he said to his wife, "Go home and cook some bread and milk for him, for he will not need teeth for that. Oh, and bring the pillow from my bed. I will let him have it to lie on." From that time on, old Sultan had all that heart could wish for. One day the wolf came to him and said, "Of course you would not let on to see me if I came and took a sheep from your master's flock. It is hard work these times, I can tell you, to catch one." "Oh, you must not count on that," said Sultan. "I will be true to my master, and let no one steal from him." The wolf thought this was a joke of Sultan's, and he came that night to steal a sheep. But Sultan had told the man, and he caught the wolf and beat him well. The wolf was so mad at Sultan for this, that he sent him a challenge to meet him in the woods and fight. The challenge was brought by a wild boar, who was to be the wolf's second in the fight. Poor old Sultan could find no one to stand by him but a cat with 3 legs. But they set out without fear, the cat limping on its 3 legs, and its tail stuck high in the air. The wolf and the boar were on the spot that had been named, but when they saw the pair coming, they thought Sultan had a big sword, because they saw in front the tail of the cat. And each time the poor thing limped on its 3 legs, they thought he was going to pick up a great stone to throw at them. They were both scared, and the boar crept under some leaves, and the wolf climbed up a tree. When the dog and cat came to the spot, they did not know what had become of their foes. But one of the boar's ears stuck out, and the cat saw it twitch. It looked like a mouse, and the cat made a spring and gave it a good bite. The boar let forth a scream of pain, and ran off into the woods, crying, "There is the guilty one, up in the tree." The dog and the cat looked up and saw the wolf, who was so full of shame for his acts that he was glad to come down and make peace with the dog. End of chapter 29. Old Sultan. End of Grimm's Fairy Tales, retold in 1-syllable words by Jacob and Wilhelm Grimm.